Raising his weapon high above himself, he releases his mana from all parts of his body. The group standing opposite is hit by a shockwave, but they manage to stay on their feet. A boy breaks away from the crowd and comes forward, saying between gasps that it's all over now. Turning to the master of the labyrinth, he already begins to prepare the spell that is born at the end of the weapon. It continues to increase in size until it reaches its eventual peak, and he rushes towards the master of the labyrinth, who, for protection, constructs several protective barriers. The boy's attack, crashing into the first of them, begins to bite into the magic rune with furious force. The confrontation is short-lived, and eventually each barrier collapses, allowing the beam to rush towards its target. He, clearly not expecting such an attack, begins to scream as he is consumed by a furious and insatiable fire. The result is a powerful explosion, scorching the group standing at a fairly decent distance. The gamer breathes a sigh of relief, happy that he has finally managed to win, and talks about the difficulty. However, he believes that he did not have too much difficulty, since his character is a magician. The boy's exploration of the achievements screen is interrupted by a sudden notification. He is offered to try the latest difficulty of the developer level, which cannot leave him indifferent. The skill offer puzzles the guy, but he is not sad, deciding to re-roll in case of failure. Since his hero is a mage, the gamer puts all the points into wisdom and starts the game, but then something strange happens. At the moment when the boy tries to understand what is happening, he is blinded. From somewhere in the darkness, voices come calling for him to wake up, and Caleb's eyes snap open. A mean-looking guy, calling his interlocutor a criminal, asks if he can't collect his thoughts. The guy mentally tries to understand whether this person was really talking to him. He comes to the conclusion that this is a dream, because he is not a criminal, but just a second ago, Caleb was just playing a game. The man doesn't like the smile opposite at all, and he calls its owner an impudent bastard. He jerks the boy towards himself sharply, then immediately pushes him away, unclenching his fingers. Saying that he will die soon anyway, the man advises that it is better to go crazy in order to feel less pain. Caleb convinces himself that it is just a dream, but for some reason he clearly feels a strong pain. Looking at all these people, the guy tries to understand why this dream seems so real. The old man who emerged from the portal says that everyone should have received their magic wands. For those who have committed crimes and become slaves, this labyrinth is the last chance to change their fate. The money earned in the labyrinth can be used to buy yourself freedom. Hearing the words that if they want, they will be given the chance to become a student at the Magic Academy, Caleb remembers the game. The setting is incredibly reminiscent of the Abyss Labyrinth, and the guy doesn't want to believe that he is in a game. Meanwhile, they are told to go inside in the order in which their groups were assigned. They walk in the semi-darkness with identical thoughts in their heads, but with different opinions on this matter. Caleb thinks that he has no idea what's going on, but he's in the body of a character he just created. If this is a labyrinth within a game, then the situation is not the best, and you need to, first of all, weigh everything carefully. The guy is going to find out the statistics of those who came with him, including himself. One of the companions assures the others that everything is fine because he has just received a divine prophecy. And, saying that he was informed that they would all die, the prophet bursts into mad laughter. Caleb mentally concludes that this man has gone crazy and everyone here is scared to death. He asks the prophet to calm down, saying that as long as they stay focused, they can all survive. The guy suggests moving slowly, but he is interrupted by a shout asking to be taken away from this place. Caleb mentally calls the panicker a fucking idiot, turning to face him. But I can't voice my further thoughts out loud, because what I see takes my breath away. For the escape attempt ends with a resounding fall of his body after he is pierced in several places. A little further down the course, a sinister chuckle is heard and a goblin's face appears from the darkness of the corridor. The madman, echoing the mad laughter, rejoices that everything happened exactly as he said. Starting to say that the oracle never lies, he falls silent, forever. The goblins are already becoming more numerous. They appear from the darkness, anticipating a wonderful feast. As the prophet's body falls to the floor, the elf squeals in fear and the goblins continue to approach. Trying to digest what had happened to the second of the group, Caleb became aware of accelerating footsteps. The goblins rush towards him, and a thought strikes the young man's fevered brain. He involuntarily thinks about what will happen to him if everything continues like this. And the vile creatures, without wasting any time, lower their weapons with a battle cry, finding themselves very close. Thoughts about death prevent one from thinking clearly, but in this situation, one cannot think about anything else. And at this moment, a special ability called the step-by-step hourglass is activated. The clock pauses for one turn for 60 seconds, passing the baton to Caleb and starting the countdown. The guy tries to understand what it is, reading the lines about how the ability is triggered automatically in emergency situations. Caleb realizes that time has stopped only after 5 seconds. He admires this, but quickly pulls himself up short, reminding himself that something else is important now. The guy orders himself to first raise his wand and block the sword strike. Hearing a distinctive sound, he notices the action points indicator and begins to reason. It follows from this that only 1 point is spent on one movement. The guy thinks that it is difficult for him to combine. Just when he thinks he can't dodge and block at that speed, he notices something, and the question arises in his head about how he can still breathe if he can't move. Caleb wonders if he can speak and checks his action points gauge. By visualizing, the guy assumes that his speech will be viewed like a command in a chat. Just one wave of the wand takes away another action point. There are only 5 seconds left until the end of the turn, and moving an object takes another -1. The guy casts a rune, and this is equivalent to another action, emptying the gauge completely. When there are 2 seconds left in the countdown, Caleb speaks the activation words for the fireball spell. The system announces the end of the turn, the flip of the hourglass, and a 60-second recovery time. And the very next moment, an all-consuming flame bursts out from the end of the magic wand, roasting the enemies. The girl's gaze changes to one of confusion when a gust of air brings a wave of heat to her. And the stream of fire, having finally taken the form of a ball, picks up the remains of the goblins and carries them deep into the corridor. Trying to catch his breath, Caleb finally realizes that he just almost died, and he wonders what he did wrong. Looking at the guy who has given in to his emotions, he thinks that he cannot die like a dog without a reason. And while Caleb isn't entirely sure yet, it seems like the system in this world is the same as in the game. The guy thinks that no one knows more about magicians than he does, and also that he doesn't know how long it will take to find a way out of this place. Therefore, Caleb considers farming and finding reliable allies as a priority. Remembering that he is not alone here, the guy turns to the elf. He asks her what magic is in her wand, and it turns out to be lightning. But the girl warns her interlocutor that she has never used magic wands before. Letting out a heavy sigh, Caleb tries to reassure himself that it's better than nothing. He says that even in this situation the elf has no choice, and advises using a wand in case of an attack. And yet, be that as it may, they should now try and find a way out of this place. Caleb thinks about not knowing who it was, the developer, or God, who dragged him into this horror. The elf asks her involuntary companion to wait for her, and he thinks that he will survive. Several years ago, the labyrinth was destroyed, and this caused terrible consequences. Monsters poured out of the resulting portal and immediately covered the entire surface. As a result, countless adventurers and mages died. Slaves are thrown into the labyrinth, and those who survive are raised to train labyrinth-exploring mages. But this is just the premise of the game, so there is no guarantee that everything Caleb knows is true. The girl hesitantly introduces herself as Yurnal, and the boy, reciprocating, says that there is no need for thanks. For a while, an oppressive silence hangs between them again, but the girl can no longer hold back. Yurnal dares to express surprise at the boy's calm and taciturnity. The fact that he interacted with others quite a lot on the slave ship raises questions in Caleb. He understands that there may be people here who knew who he has now become, before. Yurnal says that she used to live in the Enchanted Forest, and then got a job at the mission center. But it turned out that the company was dealing in drugs and falsely accused the elf, and that's how she became a slave. Thinking that stress might be the cause of her talkativeness, the guy asks her to calm down a little. And then time, as usual, freezes, presenting a scale to the attention and inviting you to make your move. The countdown that has started makes the guy think that he has stepped into a trap. But Caleb immediately mentally urges himself to remain calm to avoid problems. He recalls that most of the traps in this section are mechanisms that extend out from the wall. Fortunately, on Yurnal's side, the wall is clear, with no gaps visible. The guy understands that it is risky both to watch what is happening on his part and to do nothing. However, turning around, he sees that there are also no holes on the right wall. The ceiling also turns out to look quite ordinary, so only the floor remains. There are 4 types of traps in the first level of the labyrinth. One of them is the rising one with thorns, whose thorns, rising from the ground, pierce the legs. The second could be an explosive nail trap, which has a wide range of action. Along with them, there is a gas trap that sprays poison or sleeping gas. The last one may be a falling trap that throws those standing on it to the second floor. Caleb concludes that he is also in danger if the ability was activated, but this is not the first trap. He says it really irritates him that he can't move without risking himself. So he takes a step, deciding to just step on it himself. So the guy spends all his action points, and just then, his turn ends. The elf, not noticing anything, continues her movement, trying to take a step. Ikaya stumbles and the girl barely manages to keep her balance. Yurnal asks why the guy did that, and he says that she stepped into a trap. It activates when you lift your foot, so Caleb stepped on it, glad it wasn't the 4th. The girl apologizes, asking how she can help, and the guy asks her to remember the barrel she encountered along the way. Yurnal remembers one, and the interlocutor asks her to bring the barrel here. Agreeing and promising to return as soon as possible, the girl runs away, and the guy begins to think. 30 minutes have passed since then, but the elf is still not there, which gives rise to certain thoughts. Fears arise in her head, from the fact that the girl herself fell into a trap, to meeting monsters along the way, and just when he thinks that he should have been more selfish, Yurnal's voice is heard. She apologizes for the delay, arguing that the barrel is too heavy. Now the guy feels guilty, praising the girl and asking her to roll the barrel to the stove on which he is standing. Now that they're far enough away, Caleb is going to switch to his wand, telekinesis. He wants to check because the trap may be unknown to him. And, turning his magic wand in the required combination, the guy makes the movement. The metamorphosis begins to occur at the moment when the barrel is lifted, and then it explodes with a deafening sound, causing Urnal to squeal in fear. Thinking that it was a nail trap, the guy suggests to his partner to continue on their way, and she agrees. The thoughts of monsters and traps keep coming back to him, and Caleb mentally urges himself to be more careful. But there is definitely hope, because thanks to the hourglass, he makes the first move. The question arises in my head, is it possible to launch this ability at will? And the guy also wants to confirm or deny whether action points are spent when casting spells. The loud slap from the front, signaling the appearance of enemies, does not throw him off balance this time. On the contrary, the guy sees this as an ideal opportunity for himself. The goblins chuckle evilly as the system announces the activation of the hourglass. While casting Fireball, Caleb notices his action points gauge draining. The system starts a countdown from the start of the recharge of the skill performed. When this time is up, Caleb activates Fireball again. Concluding that each spell costs an action point, the guy sees a notification about the end of the turn. And at the same moment, the space around is engulfed in flames. When the spell reaches the goblins, it fries them thoroughly, forcing death screams out of the creatures. The guy allows himself to look away from his targets only when they fall silent. He thinks that he could, theoretically, fire 4 fireballs in one turn. The girl is delighted because she believes that Caleb has quick summoning and summoning without a spell. She says to herself that she is weak and unable to use magic. Saying that she is of no help and calling herself a burden, the elf expresses regret about this. Caleb mentally agrees that the girl is useless as a warrior or a mage, but she has another advantage. The boy asks Urnal how far she can jump, and she is puzzled by this question. Remembering what happened then in the magic forest, the girl says that it seemed to be about 4 meters. The guy makes an analysis in his head, according to which Urnal's agility should be at least 5. Handing her the weapon, Caleb asks if the elf would like to try using the bow. Urnal admits that she also finds it more convenient to use a bow, and sometimes she also shoots with it. The guy encourages this and asks his interlocutor to cover his back, and also asks for a magic wand. The girl promises to try to buy time to make it easier for the guy to cast spells, and he thinks about the abundance of magic wands. The elf's ear catches an unguarded sound, and she turns to Caleb with concern. Turning around, the girl informs her companion that someone is following them. Caleb follows her example, turning his head in all directions in order to anticipate the attack. Not noticing anyone on either side, he tells the girl about this, but she stands her ground. Caleb has an idea about this and asks the girl to close her eyes for a second. The blonde gets scared, asking a lot of questions about the reason for such an unexpected request. But in the end, he gives in, exhaling heavily and meekly agreeing. Caleb asks her if Urnal can tell where and how many stones fell. Hearing the answer, the guy is convinced that the elf has an ability called sound display. Now he asks to name the number of people who were following them, which turns out to be 4. Hearing that they are all heading in their direction, Caleb mentally becomes wary, fearing for their lives. He tells his partner to follow him, offering to find a place to hide, and Urnal agrees to wait in one of the corners until the pursuers pass. Crouched behind the wall, Caleb tries to keep his cool, but the approaching footsteps make him nervous. They are getting closer and closer, and the guy understands that he needs to do something immediately. The elf is even more tense because she doesn't even have the beginnings of a plan in her head. Realizing that delay would only be to their detriment, Caleb jumps out and orders the intruders to stop. Pointing 2 magic wands at them at once, the guy asks about the reason for following them. Baldy responds that he has no business with Caleb. However, he and his friends need our hero's partner. The bald man promises to spare his interlocutor if he simply gives them this elven bitch. Novice spells won't be able to penetrate these shields anyway, just like these toothpick arrows. He advises against even trying to repeat the spells, promising that the first attack will be theirs. The man recommends saving your energy for something else and choosing the easy way out. An alternative option is to join them and work together as a group of 5. The man himself proposes to divide the subject of the dispute between themselves. Urnal's voice vibrates with fear as she turns to Caleb questioningly, awaiting his verdict. The man continues to persuade the boy to his side, but he mentally answers him negatively. Caleb thinks that with Urnal on guard, he can rest, but with them, that won't happen. And the guy tells these bandits to shut their dirty mouths and leave if they don't want to die here. Urnal can't believe his luck, joyfully shouting out his comrade's name, and the bald man, smiling, clarifies, assuming that his interlocutor is quite the joker. But he replies that he is speaking in all seriousness now. The conciliatory expression falls from the bald man's face as he spits out a word of agreement. He orders his friends to kill both the arrogant boy and the elf bitch. The hourglass activates, signaling that it is Caleb's turn. He, even though the robbers don't hear, reminds them that he gave them a chance. He thinks that if the double stick seemed weak to this idiot, then he was very wrong. Looking at the puddle in which the opponent's feet are immersed, Caleb smirks coldly. Water is an excellent conductor of electricity, and Urinal's wand has a shock charm. Normally, it would have hit only one target, but the liquid changed the situation. The lightning bolt rushes forward, guided by the hand of its master towards its unsuspecting victims. Thinking that the electric shock will make them drop their weapons, the guy adds, "Fireball." The guy says that the first attack will hit the puddle, and the second, aimed one, will hit the bald guy. Caleb spends the last point of the scale in the same way as the second, on the fireball spell. The system announces that all action points have been exhausted, and the user's turn has ended. And at the same moment, a charge hits the puddle in which our hero's enemies are standing. And already in the next, followed by piercing screams, full of pain and despair, the men scream. Reflexively, weapons fall from weakened hands, partially sinking under the water. And the bald man shouts out a puzzled question just as a fireball flies towards them. Contact with water causes steam to form, causing him to retreat and cover himself. Saying that he can't see anything, the bald man tells his boys to spread out. But when the smoke clears, a fireball flies straight towards him, already dangerously close. When they come into contact with each other, an explosion is heard, forcing the bald man's opponents to take cover. Caleb turns to Urnil, giving the elf the command they had agreed on earlier. The girl pricks up her ears to more accurately determine the source of the desired sound. And literally a second later, he releases the arrow, having finally decided on the trajectory. Caleb is confident that despite the density of the steam, Urnil's echolocation will not be affected by this variable. And then the guy gives the girl the order to shoot at each of the enemies. He thinks that the elf must remove at least one before the cooldown of his spell ends. Caleb is sure that the bald one can be written off. Since he was hit by the fireball, only the others remain. There were 2 seconds left before the skill would be restored, which had never seemed so long to the guy. Caleb advises the girl to aim at the warrior first, but she says that all these people are already dead. The guy is puzzled, remembering that the elf only fired 2 shots from the bow. He looks incredulously towards the group of opponents, searching for silhouettes in the clouds of steam. There he finds confirmation of the words of the girl, who committed a triple murder with 2 arrows. Turning to Urnil, the guy says that he finds her more terrifying than he thought. The girl awkwardly retorts. A cough comes from the direction of the fallen opponents, and the person from whom it escapes gasps for air. Baldy wonders in his mind, trying to figure out if he really fainted right in the middle of the battle. Noticing that the man is alive, Caleb acknowledges the fact. The bald man asks the guy who he is and how a magician who doesn't cast spells ended up in this hole. The guy still can't believe that this kid cast 3 spells at once without any hesitation. Hearing words about injustice, Caleb calls his interlocutor funny because he himself followed them. The latter says that he did not want such a life, sharing that he was exiled and became a slave due to his lack of magical talent. He regrets not having half of Caleb's gift, believing that otherwise his life would be different. The man begins to complain about life, hiding his face, streaked with tears, and gives up the ghost. The guy looks at him carefully, thinking about the current situation. Urnil apologizes to her partner for the fact that her words turned out to be a lie. He asks her not to apologize, asking if it was really the elf's first fight. The girl confirms that this is the first time she's shot at people, and Caleb admits that this is also the first time he's used magic against them. He offers to examine the equipment of his former opponents, mentally amazed at the calm after the first kill. Caleb is sure that everything would be different in reality, but now it doesn't even seem shocking. Although, remembering the goblins, the guy recalls that back then he was truly afraid of death. Caleb's thoughts shift slightly as he glanced to the side, and yet he is firmly convinced that he will never be able to get used to the smell of blood and burning flesh. At the same moment, Urnil's voice is heard from behind, informing her comrade that she has found the backpack. Looking at it, the guy asks whose it is, to which the girl suggests that the item was stolen from another adventurer. Inside are a handkerchief, a Bible, a frying pan, bread, a knife, a rope, and a wallet. The adventurer looking out from the photograph is named Avinson and has been awarded the rank of F. Urnil is surprised by the name, saying that there is no such thing here. Caleb assumes that this is the real owner of the backpack. The boy believes that he most likely died and was robbed and killed after he fell behind. Now that he thinks about it, he died in the game too, and the bald man knew the basics of combat tactics, but he didn't expect the trick. Putting himself in his shoes, Caleb believes that he would never have considered such a possibility. He thinks that he would have died the same way. Without the hourglass, he would have been dead long ago. Relying solely on ability and luck is not his style. Caleb calls Urnil with him, offering to move on. The girl agrees. He thinks that he needs flawless strategies without variables because his life depends on it. The guy believes that you need to face the truth, despite the fact that this world is exactly like the game world. After all, at the same time, he is now the reality in which he must survive. Glancing at Urnil, the guy notes her heavy breathing, but it's not surprising. They had been on the road for 12 hours, especially since they had to fight off goblins, so it was no wonder the elf was tired. When Caleb asks about a break, the girl instantly perks up, not believing her luck. Making a stop, they light a fire. The guy thinks about strategy, and the girl is tinkering with something. Finally, she hands her comrade a slice of bread, politely offering him something to eat, and the guy thanks the elf. As he is about to bite again, Yurnil gets his attention by calling. She thanks Caleb again for saving her twice today, but he thinks otherwise. In response to his modest speech, the girl asks what if he had accepted those people's offer back then. The guy retorts, asking in response why he would do such a thing. He continues by saying that he does not abandon people he trusts, believing that this is not right. Considering Caleb a true comrade, the elf invites him to go to bed first, promising to keep an eye on him. Saying that he won't argue and that he appreciates it, the guy wishes the girl good night. The system sends a notification about entering the dormant state and increasing the level, which surprises Caleb. Meanwhile, a table with the points of wisdom appears in front of him, of which there are 12. The guy does as usual, adding all the points to the wisdom attribute. He notices a window with Yurnil's name, coming to the conclusion that he can check the stats of his allies if they are in the same group. Looking at the girl's dexterity, which is 8, the guy involuntarily admires. As Caleb finishes the state of rest, he's not even surprised that he's still stuck in this place. Turning to Yurnil, he now suggests that she get some sleep herself, and the girl thanks her comrade. Quickly burying herself in the blanket, the elf admits that she is dying to sleep. The girl, already falling asleep, is attracted by the cautious fussing of her ally. Yawning sweetly, she asks what he is doing there. Caleb says he's just checking something because this angle should fit just right. The elf doesn't understand what he's talking about, and she asks the guy about it again. Meanwhile, he takes a magic wand from his belt and casts a fireball spell. The fire rushes straight at the shield and, hitting it, splits the wood into several pieces. Not particularly impressed, the guy mentally notes that the power has increased compared to what it was before. He waits for the dust clouds to clear completely and becomes completely convinced of his words. Yurnil's sleep is suddenly lifted when she notes with admiration that the boy has destroyed this shield. She falls to the ground and passes out, saying that this is pure madness. Saying that they should now start looking for a way out, Caleb stops short, hearing a sweet snore behind him. He concludes that this elf seems to be quite tired. The girl asks the guy about his opinion on the time it takes to find the gate, and he answers vaguely. After all, the location of the gates is chosen randomly, meaning everything depends only on luck. The guy believes that his own is most likely at a low level, which means completely disconsolate conclusions. Just thinking about the fact that they might have to wander here for a week to get out, he is surprised. While Yurnil was amazed at how quickly she managed to find a way out, she was only alarmed by the group of people standing at the door. Their equipment makes the guy think that they are veterans, which means they need to act with caution. Meanwhile, the two of them are approached, asking if they belong to the Academy's slave group. While Caleb doesn't think they seem hostile, he's pretty sure the situation has gotten more complicated now. The gnome asks Emma when the last time the Academy sent slaves to the labyrinth was, and she replies that it was yesterday at 10 in the morning. Redhead, calculating that more than a day has passed, admits that he is impressed that the guy held out for so long and reached the exit. Looking at the elf, the dwarf notices that she has abandoned useless magic in favor of a bow. Screaming in fear, the girl jumps back and hides behind her comrade's back. Noticing 2 sticks in a person's hands, the interlocutor makes the assumption that he is confident in his abilities. The gnome likes Caleb's confident answer and asks about the fireball wand. Hearing that they have it, Redbeard turns to his ally. Cycle believes that they can't just continue to sit in this place forever. Emma likes Caleb's confidence and suggests simply taking the guy in, but the dwarf retorts. Not only is he a low-level mage, he might be the same as that clown, Avison, and our hero gets tense. Assuming that this is the group of that adventurer, the guy asks them if they have lost their teammate. Without turning to his interlocutor, the dwarf answers in agreement, and he explains that on the first floor they encountered the Black Hornet, and Avison did not survive. The man says that this guy was one of the few people he really liked. It's a pity he wasn't good at magic. Emma reminds the redhead that Avison is still alive because he used the soul preservation spell and he can still be revived. A conversation arises between the three about where they can now get the Scroll of Resurrection. Caleb suggests that they have found a way out, but without the magician, they won't be able to deal with the boss guarding him. If there is a priest in the squad, then it is not undead. The troll, salamander, and bronze goat are also out of the question. The guy's choice stops at a flying character. While Yurnil asks him what they should do, Caleb thinks that the trio are eyeing her because of her archery skills. But if they were asking about the fireball spell, there is only one correct answer. And Caleb asks the trio point blank if the boss is a poisonous spider. Emma is puzzled as to how he could have found this out, and Cycle is surprised by the slave mage's knowledge of the poisonous spider. And the dwarf notices that Caleb seems quite knowledgeable for a man of his position. The interlocutor tries to hide a smile, responding with modest agreement. In fact, he knows that the poisonous spider is a monster that attacks its enemies with deadly poison and webs. So the entire room of this boss will be covered in webs, and the spider will move through them at an insane speed. He will attack the squad, applying debuffs such as slow and bind to them. Once you get stuck in the web, you can consider yourself dead. Therefore, the only one who can resist this monster is a mage who specializes in fire magic. To drag the spider down, he must set fire to the ceiling to burn away the web. Caleb is very clear that he is the only one who can do this right now. Emma says she's all for it and offers to take it on, considering the challenge simple. Cycle agrees, saying that although he himself knows little about this guy, he is smart. The dwarf is confused. After some thought, he announces that he has made a decision. And he says that the two will join their group for a while, but Caleb politely declines. The Trinity is stunned, and the dwarf voices everyone's thoughts, incomprehensibly inquiring about the reason. Yurnal asks Caleb to wait, asking why he refused them, seeing this union as a great opportunity. Asking again about the great opportunity, the guy agrees that it is a chance to defeat the boss on the way out. After all, defeating him means that the gate will finally appear, and they will be able to get to the surface. There's just one thing those three aren't telling you, but Caleb knows. Only 4 people will be able to pass through this gate. Yurnal begins to guess what this is about. Caleb continues, saying that the gate is unstable and is letting people through one at a time. Every time someone crosses them, it further destabilizes the situation, changing the color from green to red. There's only one spot left in this group, and all they need is a guy to take down the spider boss. From this it follows that the Trinity asks to leave Yurnal in the labyrinth. The dwarf praises Caleb for noticing this and asks for the guy's name. He says he didn't mean to hide it and apologizes, saying it just happened that way. And Redbeard would be ready to take them both, but the group needs only one magician who is given a chance to survive. And the dwarf asking how about letting the elf go. The girl begins to stutter, questioningly addressing her ally by name. He remains sullenly silent for a while, causing the silence in the corridor to become tense. Thinking that this offer is tempting, the guy admits that it almost convinced him, but if he's still a slave after he gets out, they'll just send him back. Thinking about whether those 3 would have left him in their group, the boy believes that he would have been thrown back among the outcasts. Thinking that he will never find another Yurnal, Caleb begins to speak, and he says that he will not leave this girl, adding confidence to his voice. Hearing these words, the trio tenses up because they expected a completely different answer. Even the elf herself is puzzled, considering her friend's behavior somewhat reckless. Our hero, meanwhile, says that he will make a counter-offer to the group instead. Hearing the proposal to hire them, the dwarf is perplexed, because in exchange for payment, this guy will lose the gate. But he still tells this impudent little bastard that he agrees and specifies the price. By naming a price of 10,000 gold, the boy makes Yurnal cry out and ask if he knows how much it is. Caleb grins and answers yes. And he mentally adds that the magic stones and equipment they looted today can be sold for 2,000. Each of their slave contracts is worth 3,000, meaning the pair will be able to cover the cost of their freedom and emergency expenses. Emma offers to simply pay, but the gnome reminds her that she herself is costing a lot. Caleb thinks that they hired this notoriously expensive priest because they could afford it. Saikal suggests ending it and going their separate ways, and the question of 10,000 of his share comes up. Caleb is well aware that the real reason for all this is Avison. After all, they need the scroll of resurrection before his soul-preserved corpse begins to decompose. Meanwhile, time is running out, which means the trio will have to accept Caleb's terms. Saikal asks to simply agree, since there are no other magicians nearby. Meanwhile, Caleb asks the priestess Emma to swear oaths before the goddess Nathaniel for the contract. She asks her interlocutor not to worry, because divine oaths cannot be broken. The dwarf can't just agree to this guy's terms completely, so he offers 9,000 instead of 10. But Caleb is no slouch either, and to make sure everything is on his terms, he asks for another 500. The dwarf does not back down, naming the sum of 10,300, but his opponent is adamant. Then the interlocutor begins to lose his temper, not wanting to pay the slave mage 9,500 gold pieces. Realizing that there is no other choice, Redbeard agrees, and the guy promises that he will not regret it. The dwarf already regrets starting this dialogue, and Emma suggests that the mercenaries come closer. She begins to speak the words of the agreement before the goddess Nathaniel, sealing it. The priestess says that Vertanen, Saikal, and herself are hiring Caleb and Yurnal for 9,500 gold. After pronouncing the conditions and possible consequences, the priestess asks the opponents a question. She asks Vertanen and Caleb if they swear to keep these vows, and they both agree in unison. Immediately after these words, the gnome turns around and, going to the door, opens it, and he announces that since they have successfully resolved everything, they should not stand still. Inside, it turns out, just as Caleb had previously assumed, everything is covered in cobwebs. The guy thinks that it is too dark here, which is why the visibility has become worse. Assuming that the boss is most likely hiding under the ceiling, his gaze catches on something. In some corners there are neutral objects that are filled with explosives. The gnome advises his companions to watch out for the cobwebs covering the floor. After all, if you step on it, it will stick tightly. Caleb considers it even more important to determine the location of the boss. The gnome thinks that you just need to burn the cobwebs on the ceiling and not play the hero. He is about to say something else, but from somewhere above comes an eerie sound. Something flies straight at them at high speed, causing everyone in the group to tense up. The web ball is closest to the gnome, and milliseconds remain before their collision. But he is not going to allow this to happen, reacting sharply and making one sweeping motion with his weapon. The gnome quickly turns to the magician, ordering him to launch a fireball at the ceiling. After all, they need to force this spider to come down to the ground at any cost. Caleb silently notes the monster's fast speed, considering it ideal that it gives itself away. And although the chances are slim, you need to inflict maximum damage in just one hit. After activating Hourglass, Caleb spends action points to fire 3 fireballs. He spends the last one on it, resetting the scale and thus ending his turn. Several spells soar into the air, heading straight towards their intended target. Already feeling the heat from the nearby fireball, the spider lets out a piercing scream. The collision proves inevitable, hitting the same spot 4 times. Saikal is hit by 4 attacks in just one turn, causing even the priestess to curse. And while the dwarf is trying to figure out if he missed the boy's spell, he tells everyone to concentrate. Thinking that, from his experience, there is no need to waste time, the guy gives a prearranged signal to Yrneel. Several arrows immediately rush at the monster, one after another, not giving it time to catch its breath. However, as they approach, the spider manages to shoot out webs several times. Caleb tells his companion to stay put for now, mentally considering that the goblin-made bows are useless here. With a screech from the spider, a pillar of fire suddenly shoots up, scorching those standing nearby with a wave of heat. Caleb asks the priestess to create magical shields, and she obediently agrees to put them up. He tells Saikal to attack when the shields are raised, and he tells the brat not to give him orders. But despite this, he takes off like a lightning bolt before the smoke has cleared. When this begins to happen, the man is already close, clearly seeing the outline of the spider. The monster helps the foggy haze to disperse and, also noticing the enemy, hurries to protect itself. But Saikal isn't about to let his target go so easily. Concentrating on the attack, he gives himself a boost of speed with a push and performs a shadow strike. One swing of the blade is enough to make the spider squeal in pain. His squeal only gets louder as another paw flies into the air. The creature twists, beginning to move frantically, synthesizing webs for its next attack. And then the dwarf shouts and turns to the priestess, reminding her that she needs to hurry. Emma already knows this, but she doesn't hesitate to activate the star shield. It envelops the group just at the right moment because the spider is already close. Caleb, however, mentally considers this to be quite predictable. He thinks that instead of blocking the poison sack's explosion, he should freeze the poison before it explodes. Believing this move to be the best, Caleb uses his second wand, releasing Ice Spike. He rushes forward and hits the spider right on target, and the monster begins to flutter helplessly. The thorn strike doesn't just deal damage, it spreads across the abdomen, causing freezing. The bag freezes, and Caleb tells the priestess to retreat and the dwarf to attack immediately. Emma has doubts. The guy starts to lose his temper, repeating his order, and Redbeard says that they usually do things differently here. Caleb is already shouting at the dwarf to do as he said, remembering that in the games, one click was enough. Still obeying the order, Vertanen notes that this brat does have some character. And, pushing off the ground, he jumps high, swinging his weapon. Then he hits his opponent with an attack called Log Splitter. The impact is so powerful that it creates shockwaves on both sides. Taking out his axe, the dwarf breathes a sigh of relief, notifying everyone else that the job is done. Looking at all this, Caleb mentally asks not to tell him that they don't know one nuance, which can happen after the poisonous spider becomes the boss. Looking up, Caleb continues to think, remembering that it is a tiny chance, but still. The fact that the second phase may begin cannot be cancelled. The Trinity is happy that they finally defeated him because they simply could not afford to fail. The elf, watching everything from the side, does not understand what Caleb is thinking, so she asks him directly why he still holds the magic wand in his hands. The guy asks her to look up for a second, and the girl, obeying, asks why. She pauses for a few moments, trying to come to terms with what she has seen, and then lets out a frightened squeal. Hearing this, the dwarf asks what is up there, but Emma also cannot see, as it is very dark there. But the beastman has no difficulty with visibility, so he recoils in horror. Seeing that the entire ceiling was teeming with spider eggs, he cursed and asked what it all meant. The dwarf, just in case, clarifies whether his comrade is joking, but his voice still sounds wary. The priestess remarks with fear that no one warned them about the second phase, and Redbeard echoes her, burping. Caleb orders Yrneel to immediately roll him an orcish barrel of ale, trying his best to do so. Obeying her comrade unquestioningly, the elf hurries to carry out his order. And although this is really not easy for her, the girl, as ordered, puts in all her efforts. The dwarf asks Caleb not to tell him that he wants him to throw the thing away, but the answer is yes. Meanwhile, the guy asks the priestess to cast weapon light on the elf's arrow, and she agrees. Obeying the command, Emma speaks words of radiance even in the deepest darkness. Caleb asks Yrneel to shoot at the ceiling to set it on fire, and the girl accepts the order. and the very next moment, her arrow breaks away from the bowstring, beginning its flight. To the dwarf's cries, the arrow hits the spider's nest. And then he himself throws the barrel, sending the elf after the projectile. There is no more than a meter left before the barrel and the masonry touch, which Caleb is carefully monitoring. And then, realizing that the moment has come, he activates his hourglass. Following this, the mage releases a fireball, spending the first action point. Considering that this is not enough, 3 more follow him, helping to complete the line. A powerful explosion thunders, and everyone standing below is glad that such a distance separates them. And yet, despite this, several small streams gusts reach the members of the group. The Trinity is already mentally running through a repeat attack in their heads without casting a spell. They try to remember if it was always so ordinary and simple. Looking at Caleb, Vertinen tries to understand who this slave with such amazing talent is. The guy's gaze catches the movement nearby. It turns out to be an expanded portal, signifying the opening of an exit. Caleb breathes a sigh of relief and is glad that it's finally over, and they made it. He thinks that while working with a competent group is important, not being able to control everything is frustrating. When Saikal addresses the newcomer, asking who he is, his tone of voice changes abruptly. The beastman admits that at first he thought the mercenary was trying to kill them all, but he was magnificent. Caleb says he didn't think about it, because maybe they could have secured the gate too. Seriously speaking, the dwarf also praises the boy, admiring his skills, and asks who he was before slavery. Memories of playing computer games all day long flash through Caleb's mind. But of course he can't say that, so he replies that he was an ordinary slave at the Magic Academy. But the dwarf roughly understands what is going on, agreeing that his interlocutor has his own reasons for his silence. Journal meanwhile says he can't believe they beat the boss without a single injury. Vertinen echoes that. And he admits that he agreed to the contract, thinking that this couple would quickly die. Caleb now understands the reason why the dwarf assessed the work in this way. Redbeard agrees that he knows the value of money, but says they are not finished yet. Caleb also confirms that this is not the end, but Saikal does not understand what they are talking about because the gate has already been found. The guy says that the contract must be completed in the village. The elf is puzzled by this. The priestess confirms that the contract states that the agreement will be terminated precisely after passing through the gate. Hearing the words that until then the condition is considered unfulfilled, the elf notes that the gate is right here. She asks if they can't just go through them right now. Emma apologizes, but says that contracts made in honor of the goddess of justice must be fulfilled exactly as agreed. That is, both Urnal and Caleb must pass through these gates. The elf is worried that they will not succeed. And in response, he receives the words that then the contract will be completely cancelled. Caleb addresses the girl mentally, asking if she really thinks that they will bring her gold to the labyrinth. The elf asks the guy if he knew about this, and he agrees, clarifying some points. Now it also dawns on Saikal why this Miser offered gold in advance. The dwarf is defending himself. The beastman believes that a guy with Caleb's talent shouldn't die in the labyrinth, and Emma reminds him whose money it is. Taking off his backpack, Caleb admits that it belonged to a member of their group. When he mentions Avinson's name, the dwarf asks the boy to repeat what he just said. He immediately jumps up, asking if this is really the boy's backpack. And now he understands why the thing seemed familiar to him, and then asks about Avinson's body. Hearing the words that they did not find a corpse, but took a backpack from another group of slaves, the guys become confused. Vertinen suggests that Caleb expects something in return for his confession. He says that he just wants to take the backpack, and personal belongings should be kept with the deceased. The dwarf mentally addresses his interlocutor, amazed that he doesn't need money, and he immediately perks up, saying that in exchange for Avinson's personal belongings, they will give up all their rations. After all, Vertinen now considers them simply extra baggage. Caleb clarifies, asking if his interlocutor really plans to return. The dwarf replies that it will take some time to obtain another scroll of resurrection. The priestess confirms Vertinen's words, saying that they have already used one. Caleb asks what happened to the previous one. They tell him that Avison was already dying, to which the guy mentally addresses him, asking him to get out of this damned place already. The dwarf admits that Caleb is 100 times better than Avison ever was. Saikal asks his comrades to imagine what would have happened if they had hired this guy from the very beginning. A friendly dialogue begins between them about the next time, although it will cost more. Carefully raising her hand, the elf draws attention to her modest person. She politely asks this team to take Caleb with them right now. Each of the three turns a stunned gaze to Urnal, and Caleb himself, turning around, mentally asks an involuntary question. Urnal clarifies that if at least one person reaches the village, the contract is considered fulfilled. She repeats the words that the agreement will remain in effect until both sides are destroyed. Urnal continues, saying that with this money, Caleb will be able to buy himself freedom and equipment, officially joining their group. Emma asks her interlocutor to wait, asking what about herself. After all, even Caleb almost died in this place. What can we say about the elf? And she replies that she doesn't think they will ever be able to find a way out again. At this rate, she'll just die here, so Urnal asks Caleb not to stay for her sake. The elf believes that if she were here alone, she could have died long ago. And only thanks to Caleb did she manage to get to this place. The guy says Urnil's name with puzzlement. The elf says that she is sincerely grateful to the guy and will never forget him. She asks him to live on for both of them. The silence that reigned, interrupted only by the blonde's sobs, was broken by the dwarf. Addressing the elf lady, he says that recruiting members of another group in the labyrinth is usually considered rude. The dwarf admits that he thought of them both as former convict slaves, without thinking about the future. But now things are different. Vertanen wants to respect them both as an official group. And first of all, he invites Caleb to officially join their group, receiving, in addition to the promised, 25%. Thinking about it, the guy finds this offer quite generous. Urnil stands her ground, saying that she is fine and will somehow manage on her own. The elf cannot allow Caleb to die because of someone like her, so she suggests that the guy at least part with a smile. And the system informs about the possibility of expanding the hourglass when choosing to stay with Urnil. Caleb ponders the possibility that this might be a hidden feature of the hourglass, wondering what to do now. It looks like the skill expansion is about commanding party members, which brings up some interesting thoughts. Caleb suggests that this way he can give orders to others during his turn, but within their capabilities. But he is more inclined to believe that the command he will be able to give will most likely be a simple action. After this, Caleb moves on to discussing the expenditure of action points. If Urnil can act instantly as soon as his turn ends, that would be great. Meanwhile, the dwarf is rushing the guy, and he mentally asks to give him a little more time to think. Caleb thinks about which choice will benefit him the most, because he has to be careful with that. On one side of the scale sits the hourglass update and the talented archer Urnil, and on the other, an immediate escape from the labyrinth, liberation from slavery, and becoming a member of an experienced dwarf squad. The system announces that its owner's turn is ending, and he voices his choice. Saying he appreciates their offer, Caleb replies that his opinion remains unchanged. He plans to stay with Urnil, allowing the group to pass through the gate as originally planned. Tears from the elf's eyes begin to flow down her cheeks even faster. Vertanen asks incredulously whether his interlocutor is serious in his words. The answer is yes. Caleb admits the thought that even in a computer game he would do the same. After all, he thinks that Urnil's studies are the best investment in the future. And, besides, under the elf's disapproving cries, the guy admits that he is not so heartless. When the girl continues to press, asking why he doesn't leave, Caleb tries to contain his emotions. Cycle steps forward, changing the timbre of his voice, and addresses the newcomer. And then he says that he thinks he's incredibly cool, remembering how he himself was once a newbie. Emma thinks that it looks like the Magic Academy has acquired a real talent this time, and the dwarf agrees. The priestess doesn't want to ruin the touching moment, but she's curious how the two are going to handle the next boss. For this reason, Caleb asks permission to take the spider's corpse. The dwarf considers this a different story. Listening to his interlocutor's complaints, the guy calls him heartless. But the magician does not give in, asking, in this case, to deduct the monster's corpse from the amount due to him. After this, Vertanen turns to the elven lady, asking her name. He jokingly calls her charming, and the blonde stoically defends her real name. The dwarf agrees, saying that the sincerity the girl showed was more impressive than a rapid-fire fireball. So he asks to make sure that the two return safe and sound. Handing the girl the potions, Vertanen says that this is his way of cheering them up, and the elf enthusiastically thanks him. Sekal, saying he has nothing to give right now, promises to buy Caleb a drink when they meet outside. The priestess asks that when they get out, they look for her in the city at the Temple of Nathaniel to receive a reward. Caleb politely thanks Emma for this, and she blesses the boys, promising that she would pray to the goddess for their safe return. Urnil thanks the priestess, and Caleb recalls how the blessing worked in the game. As they say goodbye, the dwarf squad says one last thing: they will be the first to return to the city. Sekal, reminding Caleb of his name, asks him not to forget it, and Emma wishes the boys good luck. The dwarf hesitates for a moment before noticing that it is time to say goodbye. This magical stone allows you to count how many people have passed through the gate. The dwarf asks the boy to find him at the Adventurers Guild when he returns to the city. Giving his name, Vertanen says he will be looking forward to it because he is confident that Caleb will succeed. The portal collapses, disappearing, and the elf, falling to her knees in dismay, asks her companion a question. She asks why the guy did this, and how they will be able to get to the next room just the two of them. He mentally replies that it really was quite reckless. But then a smile appears on the guy's lips, asking this elf not to worry. After all, this ultra-experienced gamer has already calculated everything in advance right now. Touching the blonde's shoulder, Caleb asks her not to cry, promising that they can overcome this. But first, he offers her to pull out the spider's fangs, to which the girl meekly agrees. The elf's trust reaches 100, allowing Caleb to give her commands during his turn. The girl says that she is not trying to relax, but is completely ready to do whatever he tells her. Urnil even allows the guy to use her as a shield, but she's interested in something else. The girl asks if it wouldn't be faster to act together, to which Caleb asks her to trust him. There is a reason for this, and the guy asks the elf to simply focus on removing the poisonous fang, and she agrees. Caleb thinks he really wants to help, but the chance of successfully retrieving the item depends on his agility stat. Based on their points, it's pretty obvious that Urnil will be better at extraction than the guy. He thinks that the advanced ability mechanics still need to be revisited to develop strategies for upcoming battles. Rereading the Hourglass update again, Caleb finds additional information about identity-breaking commands. These are highly complex actions or commands directed against the individual of a group member. He thinks that the visualization has given him a rough idea, but it still needs to be tested in practice. Speaking of specifics, the guy is interested in how far he can go when giving commands. Noticing that Urnil has finished, Caleb suggests that she move on, preparing poisoned arrows along the way. The girl can't stop being happy, saying that she didn't even know she had such a talent. Caleb finds this amusing, because just a minute ago, this elf was crying. And although they could die at any moment, the guy likes this smile much more than tears. He tells Urnil that by combining goblin arrows with poisonous fangs, poisoned arrows can be produced. Caleb asks the elf to deal with this too. She agrees, but she has concerns. Urnil is not sure that this will help them in a real fight. The guy seizes the initiative, and he says that the reason the elf couldn't deal good damage was because she had inferior equipment. Making a bow is difficult, but arrows can be varied, especially if you combine materials using special arrows. So even a trash bow can unleash serious power. The guy says he's counting on Urnil, remembering that this also depends on the level of agility. He admits that due to the low score, he did not expect the elf to have a better chance of success. And now the guy asks how she did it, and the blonde says that she just carefully inserted the fang. Caleb remembers that if you don't control the power, the poison gland can burst and you will die. He asks the elf out loud not to shoot yet, but to save the arrow for later, and the interlocutor agrees. Caleb thinks about testing a new feature of his hourglass. By activating them, the guy asks Urnil to take a flask of water from her backpack and give it to him. The fact that it doesn't consume any action points is something Caleb likes. As soon as the action ends, Urnil takes a flask out of his backpack and hands it to the guy. He asks why she suddenly decided to do this, to which he receives the answer that the girl thought that Caleb was thirsty. Mentally chuckling at this argument, the guy thinks that in a fight this could have completely different consequences. Noticing potential opponents nearby, Caleb believes he has a great chance to test them, and he activates the hourglass, cutting out a turn for himself in the usual 60 seconds. The first thing he does is take out one of the goblins with a fireball spell, and he leaves the second one with Urnil, asking her to shoot him in the leg, and the move ends. While the first creature writhes in hellish torment, the second screams in pain. The goblin doesn't understand what's happening, and his scream becomes even louder. When Caleb is nearby, pointing his wand at the enemy, the latter makes a questioning sound. Activating Fireball, the guy asks the elf why she shot him in the leg and not in the head. Saying that it would have been easier to hit the leg, Urnil begins to apologize, and her interlocutor becomes thoughtful. He reasons that following orders voluntarily can come in handy when he himself can't cope. And, remembering that he read about this in the notes, he is going to conduct a test. After activating the hourglass, Caleb asks Urnil to dance the low break, but nothing happens. Then the guy activates the ability again, asking the elf to dance as she likes. When his turn is over, the blonde begins to beat out a rhythm known only to her. And then suddenly he really starts dancing strangely, enjoying his own initiative. A few seconds later, she freezes as she catches her companion's disapproving gaze. Impressed, Caleb now understands how it works. Embarrassed by her own actions, Urnil apologizes, to which the guy suggests that she continue walking for now. They remain in silence for quite a long time, which causes discomfort to both of them. Turning to the elf as if by the way, the guy thinks. He wants to defuse the situation, believing that to do this, he needs to ask Urnil an important question. Caleb asks the elf to tell him everything he knows about him before they entered the labyrinth, and she begins, causing the boy to choke on the clarifying question about him becoming a slave because he was accused of murder. Urnil admits that she thought he would be scary, but he wasn't, which makes her feel relieved. The elf expresses confidence that the guy had personal reasons for this, and he reluctantly agrees. Urnil continues, saying that she heard that Caleb killed a female comrade from the Fox clan. Remembering this race, the guy mentally notes a predisposition to magic and a high intelligence stat. Urnil assumes that this rogue did something unforgivable, which angered Caleb. The same one, thinking that this looks like a cult, mentally asks the elf for forgiveness. Saying that a lot has happened, he continues on his way, and the girl asks if he was an adventurer. Urnil recalls that the Magic Academy assigns one experienced adventurer to a team of slaves. And now she understands why they do this, glad that she has Caleb. The guy thinks about what he heard, realizing what he was like before the obsession. Meanwhile, the girl screams, noticing something nearby, and soon the guy himself sees that they are near the exit. Although he expected the exit to appear again, such quick luck puzzles and makes him think. The elf attracts Caleb's attention, asking him to look at it. Having studied the face of this young man, the guy realizes that he is Avacyn. The last one looks like he's sleeping, which makes one wonder about soul preservation magic. Caleb suggests that this magic could be insanely expensive, something slaves couldn't even dream of. The assumption that Avacyn is a nobleman leads the guy to characteristic thoughts. Noticing the absence of one of his legs, the boy asks Yrnil if she hears any chewing or grinding sounds nearby. Listening at the same moment, the elf confirms his guess, catching truly unpleasant sounds. The interlocutor asks her about the flapping of wings, but Yrnil denies this. What's happening seems strange to Caleb because the dwarf was talking about the black hornet. But if it were him, he would not fly away and go hunting again if the prey was still there. Caleb then rhetorically asks if they should check the direction of the noise. Yrnil pauses and says that, in fact, there is no need for this. After all, what makes these unpleasant sounds is right here. The creature turns out to be a black hornet larva, and Caleb gets thinking. It seems strange to him that the monster left its cub unattended and disappeared. And if the hornet itself had been killed, there would at least have been traces of a battle, but only one larva remained. There is also an option according to which the hornet was forced to retreat after meeting someone stronger than itself. The guy doesn't believe that the strongest monster on the first floor would escape on its own. An idea flashes through his mind, and Caleb asks Yrnil if there have been any recent reports of missing adventurers. The elf says that there was someone named Mr. Back-Ek, and the guy finds out the details. And then, while Yrnil asks about the reason for the sudden interest, he realizes that things are bad. Breaking out in a cold sweat, the boy thinks that the worst-case scenario for a magician is becoming an outcast. The elf asks her partner what's wrong, and he asks her about the possessed adventurer. She says she doesn't know anyone like that, and Caleb remembers that this is indeed rare in the labyrinth. After all, even after completing the game many times, there was only one instance of the Taken appearing as a boss. The adventurer's soul is captured by the master of the labyrinth and becomes a controlled, mad servant. He retains all the skills and spells he had in life, but they are now even more powerful. Now Caleb understands why they found the room with the exit so quickly and calls it a nightmare. Although Yrnil doesn't quite understand what's going on, he asks if they're really finished already. The guy suddenly realizes that this was too much. He shouldn't let the elf see him confused. Asking her not to worry, Caleb says that although the situation is difficult, they will cope with it. Waved his magic wand, he promises that everything will be fine, because the girl has him. A nasal laugh and a request addressed to the interlocutor to stop talking like that come from the tavern. The offended dwarf defends his position, because he is telling the truth, but his interlocutor still does not believe him. The innkeeper begins to argue why a super-fast spell-less mage is a fiction, and Vertinen retreats. The interlocutor notes that the most important thing is that the dwarf returned alive, and then asks him to wait. Vertinen is surprised by the foam, asking what it is, since he didn't order anything. The innkeeper says that he ordered it in a sing-song voice and, laughing, suggests that they drink it faster and stop talking nonsense. The dwarf pours the contents of the mug into himself purely out of anger. The innkeeper asks how Cykle is doing, and his interlocutor replies that he is doing well, despite his lack of experience. The man believes that everyone he introduces to the dwarf is promising. He compares them to Mr. Back-Ek. Vertinen laughs, considering the latter a legend among adventurers on the first floor. The dwarf says that no one could have thought that the master of the labyrinth would catch him, and the interlocutor agrees with him. Redbeard begins to talk about even more sad things, but he is interrupted by those who entered the tavern. Almost running inside, this woman asks if it is true that her son, Avacyn, is dead. The interlocutor, expressing regret, is forced to agree, speaking about the fate that befell the boy. Hearing the words that the young man was stung by a black hornet, the lady screams in disbelief. And he asks if she didn't ask him to take good care of Avacyn. The eldest son reminds his mother that his brother's soul is still alive. He suggests keeping calm and listening to Vertinen's story, agreeing that he is not guilty. The young man expresses confidence that a member of the Britvan family could not end his life so stupidly. Vertinen says that soul preservation magic lasts for a week, so resurrecting Avacyn shouldn't be a problem. The scroll of resurrection will be available in 2 or 3 days, and that's when they plan to set out. The dwarf says he's going to use a tracking spell on Avacyn's things. Hearing the words that some brilliant magician helped the Redbeard, the guy is surprised. The innkeeper briefly recounts what the dwarf told him, and the dwarf again takes offense at the narrator's ironic tone. Clarence remarks that now is not the time for jokes, but his mother interrupts him, suggesting that this magician can help them. The dwarf agrees that it is possible, but says that there are only 2 people in his group. Clarence exhales heavily, repeating the words about there being 2 people in the group of slaves. The woman pulls him back, and she says that she doesn't care how long the search takes, and is ready to offer a reward to whoever finds the body. The space is cut by the scraping sound of a chair sliding back and the address of a random listener to Madame. He is interested in the price of the issue, which is what he actually inquires about, and he asks to hire them since they have already been on the 3rd floor and are not as incompetent as Vertinen. Clarence seems to be politely asking the beastman to be quiet, but his tone is unnervingly creepy. And the interlocutor, puzzled, begins to shudder under such powerful pressure. The beastman, squealing, backs away and then quickly returns to his table. Clarence points out that if you try to settle things with money alone, weird bastards like these get involved. He tells his mother that he will personally talk to Vertinen, and he thinks about the magician from the 5th floor in his group. Clarence says that he will find Avacyn himself, since he is his brother, and besides, he is interested in that brilliant magician. And that same magician, turning to Urnal, says that this won't do, suggesting to end it. The girl clarifies what he means, and Caleb says that the larva can die of starvation in 2 days. But she is the child of the main boss monster on the 1st floor, and her scent prevents others from approaching. They need to move, because as soon as the smell disappears, the monsters will come to them en masse. Urnal worries. Caleb says that if Bakek is really here, the 1st level group won't be able to defeat him. He thinks that the best plan is for us to win and escape. Although it is difficult, we must have enough strength. Stumbling mid-sentence, the elf asks Caleb if they can defeat Bakek. Smiling, the interlocutor says that there is only one way, but it is extremely difficult. Urnal inquires about him, promising to do everything his comrade orders, and he inquires about the possibilities. And then he asks her to get ready, because they need to use a more aggressive strategy. The flames continue to spread rapidly across the area, growing in size. The goblins, frightened, recoil, preparing to run in the other direction, but they are overtaken. And a powerful electric charge pierces the green bodies, knocking out stifled screams. Caleb announces that from now on, they will begin their hellish training. The guy says that they will catch 100 of these goblins, which causes Urnal to be confused. But he, leaving the elf without an answer, jumps up, rushing into the very thick of the enemies. And he begins to throw opposing spells in all directions as he moves. The goblins don't have time to attack, let alone defend themselves. And Urnal joins his comrade, providing support with a bow. Caleb thinks that on the 1st floor of the labyrinth, the limit of possibilities is the 5th level. Since he defeated the spider, he has raised his own to just above 4th. The guy is confident that with intensive training over 2 days, pumping will be easy. The reason the 5th level is important is because you learn a new ability. Caleb wants to collect only the most useful magic stones and throw away the rest. And now Urnal offers to hunt the goblin sorcerer, the elf, stuttering from exhaustion agrees. The guy's going to track down the creature by finding the most useful scrolls. And he, already on the move, invites the girl to come with him, and she voluntarily, compulsorily agrees. Later, the guy praises his partner for her excellent work, and she echoes him in a tired voice. Caleb mentally assumes that all the preparations are finally complete. Urnal says that the sounds of the larva's breathing have become much weaker, as have her own. Caleb is sure that she is still alive, but will probably die tomorrow, since she has not eaten for several days. An exhausted Urnal offers to feed the larva Avacyn. In his mind, Caleb apologizes to her, saying that they still need this guy. He says out loud that desecrating a corpse while its soul is still intact is a grave crime. In response to Urnal's question, the boy replies that he is going to fill this oak barrel with water. And he agrees that this is part of the plan, and then suggests that the elf get some sleep. She perks up when she hears these words, because that's exactly what she was waiting for. But he clarifies about the changing of the guard, to which his interlocutor says that he will sleep first. Urnal asks if he is serious now, but the guy remains silent, addressing her only in his thoughts. He thinks that there is nothing he can do about it, because he needs to level up to plan a strategy. Surrendering, Caleb says that in exchange he will be on guard for 30 minutes longer, which pleases Urnal. Then the girl wishes her partner good night, and he thinks that she can be surprisingly scary. But in the end, the guy asks Urnal to wake him up in 2.5 hours. Later, Caleb says that from now on they are heading to the exit room. The elf begins to hesitate. She assures him that she doesn't doubt him, but she wonders if he's really going to fight the boss like that. The guy asks her not to doubt him, saying that what she sees is not everything, and the willingness to kill the boss does not change anything. The elf says she means something else, and says she's wondering if it will actually help. Caleb is confident, arguing that the black hornet's eggs are quite strong. As they approach the door, it opens with a distinctive creak. Entering inside, the couple with the caterpillar carefully move deeper, peering into the darkness. Finally, a silhouette becomes visible, its outlines reminiscent of a human one. With each step it becomes clearer that this is the case, and Caleb speaks up. Seeing his future opponent slowly rising, the guy hurries him. And he, having drawn a sinister smile on his face, begins to laugh madly. It takes only a couple of moments to realize that the enemy is no longer in his former place, but they are not able to turn around so quickly to see it with their own eyes. Continuing to chuckle nastily, the opponent makes a move, and at the same moment, Caleb's turn begins. The latter mentally admits to himself that he didn't even immediately notice such a rapid approach. He assumes that the enemy used shadow ambush to get behind him, and it's good that this action was predicted. And first of all, Caleb is going to hit him with a lightning strike, which consists of 4 charges. After this, the guy gives the command to Urnal to pour water on the enemy when he falls from shock. When Caleb's turn ends, the system routinely informs him about it, about the action points spent, and about the skill recovery. The enemy, clearly not expecting this, growls angrily, trying to regain control of his damaged body. As soon as he takes off, Urnil douses the enemy with water, as ordered. He is even taken aback by the plan that was so well thought out in such a short time. And Caleb, thinking that Bakek is in wet state, uses Ice Spike. It seems that he manages to get to the enemy, but the latter manages to outplay the strategist. Caleb, seeing this, realizes that Beck used a skill called Shadow Jump. Thinking that the enemy has used up all his movement skills, the guy realizes that there is still time. He then turns to Urnil, announcing his intention to lift the barrel. All this is necessary so that the elf can shoot at her. The elf follows her partner's orders unquestioningly, already knocking an arrow onto the bowstring. Throwing his hand with the ice magic wand forward, the guy repeats the spell he used earlier. By directing a stream of magic at the place where the puddle of spilled water begins, Caleb freezes it. Thus, they soon find themselves separated from the enemy by an icy lake. He, looking at the floor with irritation and suspicion, understands that this is also part of his opponent's strategy. And Caleb, mentally turning to Beck, asks him what his next step is. And while the guy is thinking about which skill the enemy will use, something unexpected happens. Urnil, who noticed the movement a little earlier than him, screams out, shouting her partner's name. She asks if he is okay and receives a positive answer, since the eggshell was able to protect him. The guy mentally admits to himself that, in fact, it scared him. Looking at the magic throwing dagger, he is amazed that it was used from such a distance. Caleb is only glad that distance has been able to reduce its destructive power. The enemy, grasping the blade more comfortably, begins to dissolve, which leads to certain thoughts. Caleb is confident that Beck's next move will be to use the invisibility skill. Then the guy asks the elf to find their enemy's position. She says that she understood him. Beginning to slowly move his ears, Urnil uses his echolocation. And soon she manages to recognize the cautious and almost silent movements of Bakek. Saying that he is here, the elf points an arrow in the direction, indicating the opponent's position. He freezes in surprise, trying not to make any unnecessary sounds, although he understands that he cannot hesitate. It's not particularly difficult for him to dodge to the side, but it's not without disappointment. Thus visibility opens up, and now the enemy's location is known not only to Urnil, but he's not going to give up. He still has an ace up his sleeve. And when Caleb sees a grenade, the guy starts to panic. After all, his hourglass hasn't recharged yet. There are still 15 seconds left until that moment. But a smile of anticipation appears on Caleb's lips as he admits he's been waiting for this moment. And then the guy, pointing his magic wand at the caterpillar, says the words of the ice thorn spell. The creature's piercing scream suddenly stops, accompanied by other sounds. Caleb admits to himself that he leveled up just for this moment. As he takes aim, he is about to use a special ability called Kill Pulse. In the game, it restores 2 action points when you defeat an enemy, but now the conditions have changed. Defeating an enemy will award a temporary hourglass containing 2 action points for 60 seconds. The guy declares his target to be a bomb the size of a ping-pong ball, which is 10 meters away from him. And despite this, Caleb feels obliged to get into it at all costs. In his mind, he calls out to the divine powers, asking them to let him hit the target just this once. Caleb casts Lightning Bolt, and the system tells him his turn is over. His opponent only has time to glance sideways in fear at the weapon in his hand, after which, a crushing explosion washes over the space around him, breaking off pieces of the vault. And Caleb remains standing for some time with his magic wand pointed towards the enemy. The guy is mentally happy that his idea worked, remembering that he was the best shooter in the army. Turning to Urnil, Caleb asks about Beck's location, and the elf names him. Then, without even thinking much, the guy sends the ice spike straight to the designated spot. The spell, hitting its target accurately, knocks muffled sounds out of his opponent. As it begins to spread throughout his body, it also causes him to wheeze softly. Believing that Beck will not be able to dodge, Caleb gives Urnil the order to shoot. The time has come. Knocking a poisonous arrow onto the bowstring and taking aim, the elf silently follows the order. Piercing the crust of the previous spell, the projectile hits the target precisely. Caleb breathes a sigh of relief because he thinks it's all over now, regardless of the level difference. The bursting of the poison sac means certain and slow death. The guy remembers that under the influence of the gas, the target receives 20 points of damage for 20 seconds. Even though the enemy's health indicators are not visible, Caleb is confident that everything will be over in a matter of seconds. In his mind, he asks Bakek to stop resisting and give in, but something makes the guy pause. At what he saw, Caleb cursed harshly, and the elf tensed up like a string. The guy is convinced in his mind that he shouldn't have relied solely on luck and tells his comrade about Plan B. She asks again incredulously, and it makes Caleb think that he had hoped to avoid this. The realization of why the possessed adventurers in the labyrinth are so dangerous flashes through my mind. This is because they retain access to the special abilities they possessed during life. Caleb remembers the conversation with Urnil the day before, when he suggested she start with just one poisoned arrow. The fact that Beck had dealt with the Black Hornet alone worried the guy, causing some kind of speculation. For example, if he was able to remove poison, that would explain a lot. But despite Buck's abilities and speed, he couldn't have fought the Hornet without being stung at least once. So if he was stung and survived, it means he had a way to neutralize the venom. In response to Urnil's suggestion, the boy corrected her, suggesting that an outcast would not use magic. That is, if it is not a bomb, not a potion, and not a scroll, only a special ability remains. The guy was wondering whether Beck would be able to neutralize the poison or not, and the elf was assuming the worst-case scenario. She believed that if this didn't work on the enemy, they would be finished. But Caleb thought otherwise. Grinning, pleased with himself, he began to share Plan B with Urnil. And now, when the ice spell didn't work on Beck, and he was actually able to neutralize the poison, it was just the right opportunity. His special ability is called Adrenaline Rush, and it primarily restores 50 health, and then resets the cooldown for one first-level skill, removing the negative effects. And using the skill, Careful Steps, Bakek takes off, leaving behind only clouds of dust. Caleb flinches back, realizing his hourglass still has 3 seconds to recharge. Meanwhile, the elf asks whether she should shoot, to which her interlocutor answers negatively. Caleb feels like their opponent will definitely dodge if they use the movement skill. And to implement their plan, there needs to be some distance between him and Urnil. That's why the guy decides to take a crazy risk by making a move. Moving towards his opponent, Caleb shoots lightning strike at him. But Beck dodges such a ridiculous attack, almost laughing. And the very next moment, Caleb finds himself completely in his power. The pressure is unexpectedly strong, and my eyes begin to darken from the pain. Caleb screams not only from the unpleasant sensation, but also from annoyance at being forced to drop his wand. Meanwhile, Beck sits down on him, grabbing him by the chest and raising a dagger, its tip glittering in the light. As the enemy's hand moves to his neck, Caleb hurries to give Urnil the command while there is still time. Realizing that something is wrong here, the enemy also turns towards the elf. Seeing her take aim, ready to release the bowstring at any second, Beck comes up with a plan. Using one of his lightning-fast skills, Shadow Surge, he moves himself and his victim away. A triumphant grin appears on his face when Beck sees the stunned state of his opponents. As the blade enters the yielding flesh, Caleb calls upon Urnil to execute Plan B. The elf herself shudders, shouting her partner's name, and he manages to dodge the second blow. Involuntarily, thoughts of how damn painful it is flash through his head. But the guy tries not to lose his composure, remembering the potion the dwarf gave him. The next moment, something unexpected happens, leaving Caleb deeply surprised. He is amazed that the enemy decided to go through his pockets right now. Instead of an answer, the wastefully thrown vial with the remains of the potion breaks. The enemy rushes at Caleb, but then the system announces that it is his turn. Now it's his turn to smirk, and the guy says that this idiot is late. And he thanks the enemy for taking the bait and implementing his plan so clearly. Caleb adds, explaining that this is exactly what he has in mind, called Plan B. He says that he himself will survive thanks to potions, so the enemy had better take this into account. And this little dagger won't be enough to kill Caleb. And when there is only 1 point left for action, he asks Urnil to shoot this bastard right now. Finally, Caleb downs one more bottle, saying goodbye to this freak. When the time for the move runs out, Beck tries to strike his victim, but he encounters an obstacle, and his face reflects deep bewilderment, causing his brain to think feverishly. Caleb explains to his opponent that it is called magical armor, arguing that he did not expect it. And he turns to his companion, urging her to follow their Plan B. There is no need to repeat, and the next moment, the poisonous arrow rushes towards its target. When Beck is hit by an arrow, Caleb asks him what it feels like to be hit twice with poisoned arrows. He, without taking his eyes off the projectile that was already releasing its steam, hisses with displeasure, trying to free himself. Caleb raises his voice, saying that now is the time for the real fight. As a muffled groan comes from the poison cloud, Urnil screams, asking the boy if he is okay. Beck bursts into a cough, which causes blood to spit out. And Caleb, frantically gulping down the potions, thinks that it looks like he will have to drink them all to survive. The enemy groups himself, gathering his last strength into a fist, and, growling, tries to push the guy away from himself. Noticing the gleaming tip of the dagger, Caleb is amazed that Beck is still capable of fighting. The opponent, meanwhile, overcoming the pain, swings the blade, trying to plunge it into the guy's body. Caleb tenses, fearing that his defenses might crack, but in vain, the alien hand stops. The weakened fingers unclench, allowing the dagger to reach the floor in free fall. And the resisting body goes limp, falling down and disarming the one holding it for a while. Caleb looks at the fallen man at his feet for a while longer, expecting a trick. But still, he mentally rejoices that, finally, this tenacious bastard has died. Urnil keeps wailing as she walks, asking her comrade not to die, who asks the elf for a potion. She, saying that they have won, asks the guy to go through the gate together, but he thinks only about the unbearable pain. Caleb suspects that this poison could kill him even if he drinks everything he has, and Yernal begs the boy not to die, offering him another bottle to drink. Caleb, however, thinking that he has no other choice, believes that he must try. After a while, the boy says that he is starting to feel like a human again, praising Yernil for the final blow. She admits that because of the terrain she was unsure of her abilities and was very nervous. Caleb thinks that any attack from a lower altitude has its risks. The guy continues to praise the elf, and she says that these words mean a lot to her. He remembers that there is one more thing they must do before they leave. Yernil asks what it is. Caleb reminds his interlocutor that there are still 2 slots in their gate, and she confirms this. And then the guy suggests that the elf take with her not only Avison, but also Mr. Bakek. At the Mouse in the Beer Barrel Tavern, they ask what brings someone who doesn't drink in this establishment here. Vertanen clarifies that the interlocutor probably came to check the Scroll of Resurrection. In response, Clarence says that his brother's life is at stake, so he wants to see for himself. The dwarf says that the scroll the interlocutor requested will be ready today, and it will be possible to enter the labyrinth at 5 in the morning. The guy thinks that the period of action of soul preservation has almost expired. It is difficult to make it in time. Just as he's thinking about the risks, Emma enters the tavern, attracting attention. She announces that she has the Scroll of Resurrection, but what's more important now is getting to the labyrinth office. For the gate to the exit from his first floor had just opened, the dwarf clarified. Clarence asks skeptically if the priestess is sure that this is the first floor. She agrees, suggesting to hurry, and Vertanen announces immediate departure. Cycle assumes that these are the newcomers, and the dwarf will soon have to fork out. Meanwhile, in the underground hall of the Labyrinth Guild office, a girl stands next to the portal. Saying that it's been an eternity, she tries to understand why no one has come out yet. The girl also does not understand why she should suffer because of ridiculous rumors about magic without casting spells. A worried voice is heard behind her, asking if anyone has come out of the gate yet and if it is opened. Clarence greets the professor politely, and she tells him that she heard the news. And he asks if he came to see if Avison survived, and he confirms this, adding that he doesn't have much hope for it. Emma notices something approaching the gate, and the professor speaks again, expressing hope that Clarence's brother was okay and asking him not to worry too much. In a completely calm tone, the professor suggests that we first at least see who comes out of the portal. But, turning his face towards him, he almost comes face to face with Avison's corpse. Recoiling as if from a leper, she asks what kind of disgusting face it is. But everything immediately becomes clear to the former comrades, and they almost simultaneously let out exclamations of amazement. Clarence, belatedly realizing that it was his brother, rushes towards him, calling his name. Meanwhile, some changes begin to occur in the portal. And the very next moment, just like the previous one, another corpse falls out of it. Recognition flashes in the eyes of those present, which Emma actually confirms as she begins to speak. She finishes her line by shouting out the nickname given to the crazy man in shock. And the professor, thinking that half of those passing by are corpses, asks what is going on. Some people can't believe that a 2-man squad actually defeated Mr. Bakek. The innkeeper's words about the super-fast mage who doesn't cast spells out loud come to mind. Clarence is puzzled, unable to believe that this is true. Meanwhile, Vertanen bursts out laughing, asking if it really is Caleb. At the same moment, a leg appears from the portal, but it is clear that it is not a man's. Yernil apologizes and says it's just her, but Caleb will be out soon too. Emma is happy that the elf is now safe, and the men experience similar emotions. Yernil agrees with them, but admits that it was Caleb who did most of the work. The professor asks if they are from the group of slaves of the Magic Academy, and the elf confirms this. Her interlocutor believes that even veteran duos would not have been able to cope with Bakek. It's enormous. And he is shocked to the depths of his soul, because these are the most ordinary slaves with low-level weapons. The fact that they united only a few days ago raises further questions. Finally, the portal lights up red, signaling that it is time for the final move. Yernil joyfully announces that now, finally, Caleb will appear. The first thing that appears from the portal is a man's hand, making its way to freedom. And then, revealing himself to the world, Caleb follows her out, causing the assembled crowd to burst into excited cries. Cycle asks if it was true that this newcomer killed Bakek, and Emma is touched by Avison's returned body. Vertanen's keen eye notices the blood, and the dwarf asks who it belongs to. The guy thinks that there is too much noise around and begins to address the priestess. And, barely moving his tongue, he says that they want 8,000 gold. At the end, after a rather long pause, he adds the word please and loses consciousness. A little later, the guy slowly opens his eyes already in the temple of Nathaniel. When asked what happened, the priestess says that he fainted immediately after exiting the portal. She believes that the cause was too large a dose of healing potions to cope without antidotes. While Caleb says he needed to survive somehow, he's more interested in where his money is. Pointing towards the table, Emma invites her interlocutor to check everything out for himself. And he, recounting, wonders why there are only 7,850 gold coins in the bag. When the guy asked the priestess about this, he received the answer that the rest was deducted to pay for the treatment. Caleb says he never asked anyone for treatment. The priestess laughs, saying that Urnal did it, and the boy mentally addresses the elf, scolding her for her extravagance. The interlocutor asks whether Caleb is now going to buy his freedom at the Magic Academy, and he confirms. And he asks about the bodies. Emma says that Avison is in the intensive care unit, and Beck is in the morgue. Caleb becomes curious about whether it is possible to revive Beck Eck. Shaking her head, Emma says that the soul preservation spell was not cast. Soul preservation magic binds the soul to the body, lasting for a week during which one can be reborn. But only if the body is returned, and the guy believes that in the case of Bakek, there is one loophole. If his soul was preserved by the Labyrinth Master in the Cabbage Bowl, it could be resurrected in the Soul Sanctuary. But since no one knows about this sanctuary, this process becomes impossible. Caleb recalls that he himself only discovered this place on the God of Strategy difficulty level. At the Magic Academy, Urnal asks the guy how he feels, and he says that everything is fine. And he continues, offering the elf to buy their freedom. Urnal can't believe her luck, rejoicing that this will finally happen. Later they are informed that, according to the calculations, the elf cannot be freed, and she is perplexed. Trying to protect his friend, Caleb clarifies in what sense this is, since they have enough money. The adamant interlocutor agrees that freedom is worth 3,000 gold pieces. However, he counters the lack of opportunity by saying that the elf's contribution amounts to 2 gold pieces. It is for this reason that the blonde cannot be freed. Caleb says he doesn't understand this, asking what the calculations and distribution are based on. The man replies that it is better to show than to try to explain in words. The scales of justice measure the contribution of each participant. On one scale is Caleb's name, on the other is Urnil's. According to the Vertinen party's testimony, this clearly reflects Jurnil's role in the battle at the exit of the gate. Caleb is amazed, because there was no such manifestation of magic in the game. And then the guy asks if Urnil's contribution to this battle isn't underestimated. After all, the elf at least created the weapon that killed Beck Eck, the opponent parries. Caleb says the plan was to use poisoned arrows for the next exit. Because if Urnil hadn't had the skill to process fangs, they would never have offered such a contract. The judge thinks, chuckling accordingly, and withdraws into himself for a while. A little later, the scales change their position slightly, taking into account the elf's contribution. The judge warns that he is going to fully evaluate their adventure. But first, he's going to use lie detection magic on them. The kids immediately notice the changes, and the system reports that this type of magic enhances the physical reaction to lies. Saying that this is standard protocol for evaluating slaves' contributions, the man warns that their tongues will be numb. He asks to put the bag on the table and then tell him fairly about his adventure and contribution. When Caleb hears the request to begin testifying, he silently prays to Urnil to be freed this time. Beck's loot and items totaled 14,600 gold, which is the cost of a 4-man raid. But Caleb can see perfectly well that Urnil's share is only 20%. The man notices that even with the recalculation, the elf's sum doesn't reach 3,000 gold. The guy curses in his head, remembering how hard they both worked. And now they are both also feeling annoyed that the elf is just a little short. Noticing Urnil's confusion, the judge asks if she is disappointed. And he continues, saying that the average slave earns 500 gold pieces. And that's only if he survives, with a 10% survival rate. He believes that the fact that the elf survived, and this income is not her merit. And he explains, saying that Urnil was simply following this guy's commands. The man continues, reminding that the elf only fired 2 poisoned arrows. He is confident that anyone who follows Caleb's instructions could do the same. And the judge, slamming his hand on the table, invites Urnil to voice her complaints, if she has any, right now. The elf says in a subdued voice that she will make a decision, and Caleb is irritated by this manner of speaking of the man. The latter asks the guy to abandon all thoughts of charity. After all, sending criminal slaves into the labyrinth is their punishment. The interlocutor expresses understanding. The judge asks the boy if he intends to buy his freedom with gold, and he confirms this. And then, directing his magic to the slave's collar, the man frees him, subtracting the amount specified from the sum. When the cursed shackles are broken, the guy cannot contain his joy about it. The judge congratulates him on his release, announcing that his assessment is complete. At that very moment the door opens, and 2 pairs of legs enter the room with heavy tread. Caleb turns to see the faces of those who entered, and hears the order to take the slave where she should go. When heavy hands fall on her fragile shoulders, the elf gasps, shuddering in fear. Caleb hears not only Urnil's pleas, but also words about how the skilled archer can be sold to the guild. Meanwhile, he himself is asked if he would like to enroll in a magic academy, and the guy is surprised by this. The man says they can't lose a talented mage with the ability to cast spells without casting spells, and so quickly. The guy assumes that he is now truly free, judging by how his interlocutor's attitude towards him has changed. Remembering that many mages die in the labyrinth, Caleb understands the reluctance to miss such an opportunity. The guy asks about the benefits he will receive upon admission, and the man begins to reason out loud. But he is interrupted by someone calling him Jacob and asking if this is really the child prodigy everyone is talking about. The old man continues to recount the rumors, saying that he had to verify everything himself. Greeting him, Caleb introduces himself, and he says that, at first glance, he liked the young man. Noting that the guy has just gained freedom, the interlocutor asks to name the magician's true goal. Caleb suggests that it's creating new magic or destroying monsters in the labyrinth, but that's the wrong answer. There is a more noble mission, which is the elimination of outsiders from another world. Power surges in the labyrinth have been causing destruction for a long time, and mages have spent years trying to figure out the cause. We monitored monster activity and patterns of power surges. Ultimately, they were able to determine one reason, which was the influx of settlers from another world. If they do not enter the labyrinth for more than 2 weeks, it seeks to destroy them. When Caleb hears that they need to be gotten rid of for the sake of peace, he thinks that even after being freed, he cannot find peace. The old man says that according to the documents, the guy was listed as an adventurer, but then he was convicted of killing a comrade. Hearing that he himself said that the man he killed was a migrant, Caleb becomes confused. Meanwhile, he is being spoken of as an ideal candidate and offered to join the migrant hunters. Of course, the only condition is that Caleb himself is not one of them. Noticing the guy's prolonged silence, the interlocutor hurries him, asking if he has really swallowed his tongue. And Caleb understands that one wrong answer will cost him his life, literally, because the lie detection magic is still active. Meanwhile, the interlocutor again hurries, asking Caleb why he is silent. After all, this wasn't the most difficult question, but the guy is trying to figure out how to deal with it. He admits to himself that after getting out of the labyrinth, he lost his vigilance, but he should have collected information about this world. Dripping with a sticky, unpleasant sweat, Caleb searches for an answer to the question of how best to respond to this. The interlocutor starts to lose his temper, asking if this guy is definitely not a migrant. Meanwhile, the door opens, letting in a new participant in the scene, who greets the professor. Clarence says that Caleb just came out of the labyrinth and was injured, so it's too early to start preparing for the clubs. They answer him that a diligent farmer always reaps a good harvest. And the fact that Clarence came all this way means that even Professor Isolov is interested in him. The guy reminds that at the Magic Academy, every second person is interested in talents, especially ones like these. After all, that would make Caleb more useful in exploring the labyrinth than in destroying the settlers. Clarence says there is no need to make a decision now, as Caleb is now a free citizen. And, to begin with, he asks to hear Professor Isolov's proposal about the Labyrinth Research Club. As Caleb follows his savior, he thinks that if it weren't for Clarence, he would have been dead long ago. Allowing himself to breathe a sigh of relief, he is glad that he was able to leave without any problems. And then he thinks about the fact that with the existence of such magic, the eradication of the settlers should be an easy matter. After all, if a spell can reveal a lie, then why was it necessary to ask the question at all? And then it dawns on Caleb that lie detection magic may have limitations that he himself is unaware of. And while the guy is secretly angry, Clarence assumes that the effect of the lie-recognizing magic has just been completed. Apologizing for not introducing himself earlier, he introduces himself, saying that he is a final-year mage, and also the older brother of Avison, whom Caleb saved and then thanks the savior. The interlocutor responds by noting that thanks to this guy, he gained freedom. Clarence also apologizes for walking silently the entire time, but explains that he thought it was impolite since the magic was still active. Caleb clarifies, and the other person responds positively, saying that most people consider this spell to be extremely disrespectful. It is for this reason that it cannot be used legally on just anyone. It is currently only permitted when evaluating slaves. Caleb is finally convinced that there were restrictions after all, and he gets angry at the old man. Clarence apologizes for the man's ignorance on behalf of Professor Meldini, and not everyone is hostile to the settlers. The guy says that, in fact, there are 3 dominant factions in the Magic Academy. The first of these is the faction led by Meldini, which is dedicated to the eradication of the settlers. The second is supervised by Professor Isolov, who advocates for aid to the settlers and leads expeditions to the labyrinth. The last faction, led by Professor Dahlstream, believes that the settlers should be honored. Caleb finds the latter hard to believe, so he clarifies, and Clarence says that Dahlstream studies ancient texts and magical tomes. According to his research, the settlers are waging war against the master of the labyrinth. To do this, they use the labyrinth itself as a battlefield. The master of the labyrinth has the ability to trap human souls and drive them to madness. No one can resist him except one single magician, who, according to Professor Dahlstream, comes from another world. Hearing the words that this man is called the Step Mage, Caleb stops breathing. And Clarence continues, saying that it is rumored that he can freeze the physical world, allowing only his consciousness to function. But the guy has no idea what step-by-step means, and considers all this to be nothing more than old scribbles in ancient books. Most of what is written also doesn't make sense, so there are barely 3 people in this faction. Caleb wonders if it can even be called a faction, and is told that the senior professor insists on it. And, approaching the necessary door, the guy says that his professor is already waiting for his interlocutor. The man inside explains that their club is engaged in research into anomalous phenomena in the labyrinth, and they, in turn, focus on obsessive adventurers and not on the settlers from another world. For example, like Bakek, someone who is not completely dead, but not truly alive either. As the elder speaks, Caleb realizes that even he doesn't know about the existence of the Sanctuary of Souls. Meanwhile, Isilov says that thanks to the return of Bekek's boyfriend, they have a rare opportunity to trace his soul. He considers Caleb to be talented and believes that he will be a great addition to their club. And now the man asks directly if the guy would be interested in joining them. Hearing the words about their mission being to track down Beck's soul, Caleb mentally smirks at the ease of the task. He considers that by restoring the soul of the possessed adventurer in that place, he could recruit him. At the same time, Caleb comes to the conclusion that Meldini's faction is no good, and the worship of Dahlstrom looks ridiculous. So far, Isilov's club seems the most adequate, but the guy asks if he can create his own group for club assignments. The man's gaze becomes focused. He says that this is the first time he has encountered such a question, and he shares that students usually ask to be enrolled in a group of senior students for safety reasons. And then he agrees to fulfill Caleb's request, who thanks him for his trust and accepts the offer to join their club. Later, the guy is taken to the dorm and shown his new room. An acquaintance, saying that Caleb had a hard day, offers him a good rest, and he thanks her. And when he gets inside, his eyes widen in amazement and a cry of delight escapes his lips. Desperately trying to contain his emotions, the boy wonders if this is really a dorm room. After all, it looks much bigger than the apartment he lived in before. Caleb wonders if he were to form a group, would they be allowed to sleep in this room? Technically no, but if everything had been according to the rules, this girl wouldn't be working overtime right now. Caleb thinks that it would be good for his interlocutor to rest at least a little. When the door closes behind her, the guy throws off his things, and the first thing he does is go to the bathroom. After the time spent in that filthy dungeon, even a simple bath seems like heavenly pleasure to Caleb. He thinks about how he and Yurnal got out of the labyrinth this morning. And Caleb, having completed the task, bought his freedom with his hard-earned gold. And then he was accepted into the Academy of Magic and joined Professor Isilov's club. Thinking about all this, what is happening seems completely unreal to the guy. Since the library is open 24 hours, Caleb plans to do some digging around and then go to the admissions office and Yurnal tomorrow. Assuming that his training is finally over, the guy is confident that there is still a long way to go. But all this will come later, because now he just wants to take a little rest from such an eventful life. As the hubbub of the room spreads, the boy thinks about how tired he is from spending the night researching in the library. But he doesn't want to be caught off guard like he was back then, by lie detection magic. A voice nearby asks if he is the student everyone has been talking about lately. The interlocutor turns out to be Dahlstrom, who introduces himself and shares the magic that summons the Book of Memory. The professor says it's similar to a special ability that students can gain after making a contract with the God of Wisdom. If you sign it, you will have the opportunity to receive the Book of Memory. By reciting the spell contained in the word remember, Dahlstrom clearly demonstrates what is said. And after this, he asks each of the students to take out their memory book and check the number of cells. Caleb obeys the professor's instructions without complaint, repeating the necessary words of the spell. The guy thinks that the number of cells in the Book of Memory depends on the level of the magicians. At the moment, Caleb is level 5, so he has 3 slots open. Dahlstrom, meanwhile, says that the number of possible spells is determined by the number of available slots. And he promises that Scarlet's assistant will teach the students this now, but the girl is perplexed. Dahlstrom, giggling awkwardly, apologizes, citing his back pain. Scarlet thought the first day of classes would be easy, but it turned out that was not the case at all. Having brought the students to the field of magic practice, the girl again says that the number of cells depends on individual abilities. When there are 2 slots, you can combine spells, for example by placing a spell in a first-class magic slot. Creating higher-level magic is called magic bookbinding, and the advantage is that there is no slot for registering magic. Although it may be difficult for many now, there is a way to link 3 spells. A triple combination is difficult to create due to its high complexity and low probability of success. But it is a powerful magic that can deal damage using the attributes of 3 spells at once. And the girl clearly demonstrates to the students the shot with 3 attributes. When the magical charge hits the target exactly, a powerful explosion occurs. Some students reflexively duck, afraid of misfires, but others watch with all their eyes. Scarlet says that if they work hard too, they can achieve the triple bind. Showing a list of first-class spells, the girl asks to choose them without rushing. She asks to consult with her if there are those who want to consult. Looking at the list, Scarlet is amazed that this mage already has 3 slots. She clarifies about the combination. Caleb, in turn, asks if it is forbidden, to which he receives a negative answer. Scarlet says she has no idea what logic was used to create such a combination. She says the choice is free, but she wonders why these particular spells were chosen. After all, the third spell, moisturizing, is actually an auxiliary magic. It increases the humidity around you. The professor, who had snuck up behind her, asks what the noise is, and his assistant is startled by the unexpectedness. And then she asks the old man to look at the meaningless combination that Caleb brought her. Smiling, Dollstream doesn't mind the guy trying her. Scarlet can't believe her ears, and her interlocutor continues, talking about research in the prism of a magician's life. The old man reminds that the Academy of Magic always welcomes new methods from magic books. Saying that he himself will be eagerly awaiting the results, Dollstream wishes Caleb luck. Later in the dorm, the latter notes that he has registered the purchased spellbooks in his memory book slots. He wonders if he should start making the binding. The Book of Magic contains a second-class magic called Dust Explosion. Blast Dust and Heat Blast have low lethality, but anyone can buy them at the bookstore. Thinking about the various options, and meeting one of them, Caleb says that he hasn't used something like this in a long time. Cumulonimbus is a cloud that creates lightning, and the guy wants to test it with the hourglass. Sighing wearily, Caleb plans to stop by the temple tomorrow morning and then the store. And then he thinks with delight that he needs to take the most important thing. The next day, the boy comes to the Adventurers Guild. Unlocking the doors with a key, the jailer rudely orders the prisoner inside to leave. He reports that she was caught transporting drugs. By calling the elf a slave, the man says that a client wants to buy her. Telling her to follow him, he adds that all this is necessary for expeditions into the labyrinth. Thinking about how she will soon be sold, Urnil remembers how most masters treat their slaves. The blonde wonders if she will be able to meet good people again. The elf wonders if she is dragged into the labyrinth again. Will she be able to get out alive this time? Not hearing the jailer's words, Urnil thinks about what will happen to her now. Remembering Caleb, she involuntarily says his name, saying that she misses him, and then she screams sharply, meeting his gaze, and he says that she scared him. Urnil asks what he is doing here, assuming that something happened at the Magic Academy. And the guy says that he can't abandon his comrade, with whom they fought for life together. He invites her to go together, promising to make the elf a free person. Urnil reminds her interlocutor that she still has money that she must return. He confirms that he knows this and says that there are two ways to set the elf free. First, collect the reward for returning Avacyn's body. Urnil is perplexed, asking if this had not already been decided. Caleb says that it was an advance of 100 gold coins. Clarence said it would be safer to get the rest later. Previously, the Academy had the right to confiscate this money. The guy says that he needs to keep Urnil as a member of his group so that no one dares to touch her. She can also go with him to the labyrinth and, if she manages to pay off the debt, become free. Saying that the choice is hers, the guy hands the elf a gift, while he himself thinks about the best scenario. When the girl reaches for the bow, Caleb concludes that she is still afraid, and then he thinks that it would probably be better to let the elf go now. And Urnil asks if Caleb is going to continue his adventures in the labyrinth. He agrees, and the elf cautiously suggests that she will be of little use. But when the guy asks if she wants to leave the group, Urnil hotly objects, saying that she wants to be his comrade. Caleb considers this arrangement ideal, but for a moment he was afraid that the elf would agree. He suggests out loud that they try together, saying that he has already found the rest of the group members. The elf can't believe that the guy was able to do it so quickly. She can't wait to meet her future comrades. She clarifies whether she can really stay in the dorm. Caleb confirms this, allowing her to settle in. Later, stomping on the floor with her new boots, the elf dances and hums a little song. She thinks that she feels happier with such equipment and clothes, although she promises to return the favor later. The girl thinks that from now on she will sleep in a hostel similar to a hotel and calmly explore the labyrinth with Caleb. Urnil is already looking forward to a warm bath, followed by a shower. It seems to her that this day is the happiest in her life, and nothing will darken it. However, this still happens because the elf comes face to face with her nightmare. She shrieks, asking why he is here, and Caleb asks Urnil to calm down. And he says that he brought it from the temple this morning, using the scroll of necromancy received from Professor Isilov. Looking straight at the elf, Bakek makes an inarticulate sound. And Caleb jokingly suggests that he is also glad to see her. The girl quietly calls the guy by name. And then, much more loudly, she says that she thinks she needs to leave here, but the guy forbids it. According to the works of Professor Isilov, something happened right here 12 years ago. In the labyrinthine city of Saint, an eruption of the labyrinth occurred, leading to mass human casualties. The number of monsters then amounted to about 3,000, a significant part of which were monsters from the depths. The research results showed that the great eruption was caused by a migrant named Henry. He lived secretly in the southern slums of Saint and was eventually found as a corpse with signs of resistance. This man conveyed a message to all the settlers to beware of the Magic Academy. Caleb wonders why he left a message that only the settlers can read. And he comes to the conclusion that perhaps this is not just a warning. Perhaps the problem is in the Magic Academy itself. What's even more suspicious is that the place that suffered the most from the eruption was the Magic Academy. The conclusion suggests itself about a battle on the front lines or the intention of monsters who have chosen the Academy as their next target. If this hypothesis is true, then there is one thought whose probability is very high. Namely, that many of the settlers hide their identities while within the walls of this academy. While he is thinking about how he himself needs to hide more carefully, someone calls out to the guy. This is Yernal, and she asks her master for permission to spend the night with him tonight. When asked what happened to her hair, the elf describes everything vividly, and he asks permission to simply cut off this creature's hair, but Caleb forbids it. He feels uneasy. Caleb says that if she wants to stay here, there is one condition. Yernal clarifies it. Pouring scrolls out of his bag, the guy shares that he bought all of this morning on the black market. Seeing the girl's puzzled look, Caleb begins to explain. He's going to check all these scrolls, and to do that, he needs Yernal's help. Noticing that Isilov has not yet left, his interlocutor hears words about the professor being busy with a new project. Meldini clarifies whether this is the project that concerns tracking the souls of the possessed. They answer him in agreement, and the interlocutor remembers that the person who spoke about this appeared. Isilov confirms this, saying that Meldini also knows this man because he is a new outstanding student of their academy. The old man asks if Isilov finds this suspicious, if this talent can really be described by the word genius. He recalls the incident with freezing the spider's venom sac when Caleb calculated everything with surgical precision. Meldini is outraged that everyone considers it normal that two ordinary slaves managed to defeat Bakek and escape. He is sure that all this indicates that this boy is not from their world, and the professor considers himself and the other learned minds obliged to check it. Isilov asks what they can do in such a situation, to lose a talented magician. Meldini agrees that he himself does not want to go too far, but it is worth thinking about something else. He asks his interlocutor to think about why their academy currently lacks magicians. Meldini doesn't want to lose everything he can because of an incident that happened to a man 12 years ago, and he promises Isilov that he will continue to monitor this student. The same one thinks that he does not want to say that he does not understand the feelings of his colleague, but they need someone who will consistently complete the labyrinth and help the academy. Looking at the advert for interviews to join the group, Caleb sees that there are more applicants than he expected. Stumbling with excitement and fear, Yernal calls the zombie to him, who makes wheezing sounds. The elf thinks that even though Bakek has calmed down his ardor, it is still difficult for her to get along with him. And she squeals once again, reminding him that she asked him not to eat her hair and cursing necromancy. Noticing that enough people have gathered, Caleb clears his throat, announcing his intention to begin. And he declares the goal of the expedition to be the search for the point of preservation of Bakek's soul and his full resurrection. As stated in the advertisement, they are looking for a warrior who can protect their group. Therefore, to prove their qualifications, candidates must first lift this barrel. Since Caleb can't check stats without being in the group, challengers must show their strength. For those who pass the first test, the next one will be a skills test. The guy asks you to demonstrate all the warrior skills you have, including shield attack and stance. And then he asks which of the candidates wants to try demonstrating their skills first. Those present are amazed that the demands of a group of newcomers are so high. Caleb, watching this, realizes that many people are already giving up on skills. Warriors, archers, and rogues gain skills by using fountains in the labyrinth, their presence being a proof of experience. Yernal whispers to her comrade that she also doesn't know how to use the skills, and he reassures her that everything is fine. The dwarf is outraged by the heroism of a guy who has only been to the labyrinth once. By asking the old man for forgiveness and pushing him aside, they ask him to move away if he has already finished grumbling. This lizard is named Bernard. He is a paladin from the Temple of Nathaniel. The observers are perplexed by his aspirations. Caleb mentally confirms his suspicions, but still considers the involvement of the Temple of Nathaniel to be too much. On this account, there is an idea that a place that rejects necromancy would not refuse to keep an eye on Bakek. Suddenly Bernard begins to cry, turning to his goddess, saying that he cannot bear this. He calls the zombie pathetic as he prepares to cleanse it, and Caleb reminds him of the expedition's true purpose. The man with the sword introduces himself as Landiford, stating his class and saying that he is an active explorer of the third floor. As he begins to talk about what would happen if they could revive Bakek, the man pauses. And then he admits that in this way he can get the key to finding his friend. Caleb thinks about it. This explorer would be encouraging, but he will probably return to his original party after the expedition. This is what's upsetting, because Caleb needs a friend who will stay with him. Appearing out of nowhere, this man asks to wait for a minute. He asks if he can have an interview, almost in a pleading tone. Landiford asks if this monk uncle is going to compete with them, and he replies that he is obliged to join this group. Caleb is intrigued by this man, as the monk class is even harder to spot than the paladin. The man, meanwhile, again politely asks to be allowed to go through this interview. And all because Bakek was a comrade to him, and he admits that it is his own fault that this guy ended up in this state. Mr. Bak was once the strongest on the first floor, remaining in this group only because of the warm relationship. But one day, the thought of the irrationality of holding back such a talented young man entered my head, combined with pressure from other adventurers who were eager to get their hands on it. and the team made the decision to let Bekek go for the sake of his own future. And then the guy smiled radiantly, as if he not only understood, but also accepted these words. 3 weeks later, the team was ambushed by raiders. Those vile bastards tried to trap them by sealing the gate. But one of the group members, as soon as he was saved, turned to the guild for help. Bekek, who happened to be nearby, immediately rushed into the still unclosed portal of the labyrinth gate. At that moment, the monk had already lost all his comrades, was cornered, and was ready to die. But at that moment something happened, and he witnessed a rift form behind him. Something emerged from there, laughing ominously, and it turned out to be a completely changed Bekek. And this creature began to kill the raiders indiscriminately, and the monk, seized with horror, fled. That is why he now has every reason to join the expedition to search for the soul of Bekek. Caleb thinks about how this is the first time he's heard about a wandering boss wandering outside of his area. The monk continues to say that not a single day of his life since then has passed without regret. But everything could have turned out completely differently if we hadn't had to save them, the weaklings. The man says that his former comrade came to save them, even selling his soul, and he ran away in disgrace. And the monk, crying out that he is very sorry, asks that he never again be forgiven for such blasphemy. Lendoford suggests choosing the monk because he deserves a chance to fix everything. He is ready to give in. But the lizard does not agree with this arrangement, saying that the assessments must be fair no matter what. He is willing to give him credit only if the monk can break this barrel. Caleb thinks that the typical monk is a dexterity-based warrior, so his stats are usually low. Although the main tank in the build that the guy used in the previous playthrough was also a monk, and this monk is not an ordinary one, but a monk of strength, which is exactly what he needed. Bernard screams and continues to scream in amazement even when a piece of wood hits him on the head. Later, Caleb asks Ames to make sure he is well prepared before they set out. The man expresses understanding about this and says that he needs to discuss everything with his wife. The guy asks Yurnal to first go to the dorm with Beck. The elf asks about Caleb's actions. He replies that he himself is going to leave for a short time at the Magic Academy to take care of some matters. If there is a punisher of the immigrants in the Magic Academy, this will be the biggest threat to it now. The guy thinks about the success of linking several unfamiliar spellbooks, and about a willing agreement with a request to carry out Professor Izalov's task, and also about the selection of a 40-year-old monk possessing incredible strength from countless applicants. He thinks that he deliberately created a scandal so that they would be convinced that he was a migrant. To survive here, Caleb believes he needs to get things absolutely clear this time. Namely, that he is not some kind of time bomb, but a damn brilliant magician. And the man who will help Caleb with this is here. After all, it is none other than Professor Meldini himself, who is right now screaming furiously, asking the question. He asks if the guy really learned how to bind spellbooks, and he answers in the affirmative. The guy considers whether he should provoke the old man a little more, and speaks up. He says that he has achieved not even a double, but a triple binding, which disarms Meldini. The old man shouts that he is not an idiot, because without the blessing of the god of wisdom, this is impossible. Dahlstream suggests that this young man might be blessed, but this only makes his interlocutor more angry. It reminds us that even one spell is not so easy to cast, let alone a triple bond. And he's going to use the G detection spell so that Caleb can prove to everyone here and now that he's not from another world. If he is wrong, Meldini is ready to apologize and offer appropriate compensation. Caleb suggests not to delay, asking to begin, since the professor knew the correct answer to this question from the very beginning. The provoked and enraged interlocutor activates the lie detection spell, and Caleb screams, asking if that's what he wanted to hear from him. And he publicly declares, shouting, that he is a migrant from another world. The hourglass activates, causing the surrounding area to freeze. Caleb is amazed at the stubbornness of this old man, because he still uttered the words of this spell. And now the guy is going to take advantage of the moment to look around and see if there is a punisher of the immigrants in the academy. He considers this the best chance to find out this important detail. At first glance, Izalov seems friendly towards Caleb, but his colleague is a real demon. Old man Dahlstream has no emotions on his face at all, so it's impossible to tell what he's thinking about. But the worried expression on Professor Amber's face gives rise to certain thoughts. And the guy makes a mental promise to himself that he will keep a close eye on this person. And then, about to start with a little lie, he says that the abyss of the labyrinth is the greatest game of his life. When the guy's turn ends, his body is pierced by an electric shock. Rushing to his charge, Izalov reminds him that such a reaction is a response to a lie. This guy is innocent. Meldini cannot believe that the young man is truly pure. His thoughts begin to get confused. Caleb mentally apologizes to him and admits that it hurt like hell. A week later, Yurnal checks to see if his comrade has fully recovered. He says he's fine, but remembers to himself that after that he was out of action for a couple of days. As hot-tempered as Professor Meldini was, his apologies were equally sincere. He gave the boy the Compass of Greed, which had the ability to find chests in the labyrinth at level 1. Looking at this little thing, Caleb thinks that he doesn't know what other abilities he possesses that are gradually revealing themselves. And now he turns to Urnil, to which the elf readily responds. And to Imus, who, although he confirms his readiness, does not look like it at all. Zombieback even utters something exclamatory and inarticulate. And Caleb himself asks everyone at once if they are ready for the expedition. And, without waiting for an answer from them, he invites them to begin their adventure in the labyrinth. Once inside, the guy mentally tries to understand what is going on here. The group standing in front is actively discussing something, not noticing the uninvited guests. Caleb whispers to the elf if she can hear what they are saying. She conveys the words that they consider themselves to look poorer than expected. Noticing the close attention being paid to them, the four of them turn around, stopping their conversation. And the girl, greeting Caleb's group, asks if they have a minute before entering the gate. The guy is sure that these people are raiders who are hunting new adventurers for their equipment. They went through first as soon as the gate opened, in case something like this happened. Caleb tisked, mentally describing this situation as a pain in his ass. When asked what's in the bag, the guy counters by asking why it matters to them. The girl says that she is simply keeping an eye on newcomers like her interlocutor. After all, the labyrinth is teeming with bandits, and she can take care of preserving this brother's valuables. Stepping forward, Ames tells the mist that there is no need for this. After all, the leader of their group is smart enough and dexterous enough to fleece the bandits themselves blind. Feigning offense, the girl says that she didn't mean anything like that, but was just trying to help. Watching her back with a skeptical gaze, Caleb is amazed at such fickle people. The girl, saying that they will go first, wishes her followers good luck. Turning to Caleb, Urnil asks him if these people were bandits. The guy asks her not to panic, confident that a frontal attack will not break Ames. Besides, if they follow them, the elf herself will be able to discover them even earlier. And as soon as the guy says that there is no need to worry, someone screams, calling for help. A moment later, realizing that it was the same girl, he regrets what he jinxed. The refugee desperately asks to be saved, saying that bandits are chasing her. Caleb asks why they should believe her, since it's suspicious that it all happened so suddenly. The girl says they were ambushed, and the guy reminds her that she tried to rob them today. She says she won't deny it, but they never expected this. The girl politely asks to be saved, and at that moment, Urnil turns to Caleb. The guy admits that his interlocutor is telling the truth, but trusting strangers here is tantamount to suicide. He tells the girl to turn back immediately if she wants to live, announcing that he will count to 3. The interlocutor stands her ground. Even when the guy starts counting, she begs him for mercy. After all, if he returns, he will die, and Caleb is already saying the next number. Eventually, the girl gives in, agreeing that she will come back. The only thing she prays for is that they don't shoot at her. At that moment, Urnil's ears pick up an interesting sound, and the elf turns to Caleb. She informs him that someone is running straight towards them. The girl staggers back with a loud scream, and several figures appear in the light at once. Panicking and saying they're coming, she grabs Imst, who asks the intruder into his personal space to stop. Caleb asks Urnil how many pairs of legs she hears, whether someone is hiding, and the elf says that there are only 4 of them. At the same moment, a swift arrow flies towards them with its characteristic whistle. However, the monk manages to quickly repel it, thereby protecting his comrades. Caleb concludes that the ambush was real, and the girl continues to run away, wailing. The maneuver works, and with a satisfied grin she turns around sharply. And it breaks, doing all this unusually nimbly and on the move. Taking Caleb hostage, the girl asks about her acting. The monk, catching these words, turns to his leader, shouting his name. The girl recites the words of the jester's spellbreaker spell. Caleb yells at Ames that he's okay, advising him to look ahead. And at that very moment, the hourglass activates, stopping time around. Allowing himself a sigh of relief, the guy thinks that it was close. He encourages himself to stay calm and set his priorities straight. Their mage lured them from the center. They didn't try to attack Ames. They needed to get past him to take out Urnil. The lightning strike fails because Spellbreaker has corrupted Caleb's magic. After immobilizing the leader, the mage eliminated Urnil, who was vulnerable in close combat, leaving only Ames. Since Beck is undead and unable to fight, the enemies took advantage of this as well. Caleb regrets not being able to use Lightning Bolt. However, there is no time for regrets, as just one mistake can mean total failure. Caleb remembers that thanks to Urnil's help back then, he learned a few things. And that's what hourglass flipping also reduces the cooldown. Caleb knows full well that 60 seconds in a fight is a fatal outcome. However, now he has the hourglass and the scroll of preparation in his arsenal. This status effect reduction scroll reduces the debuff duration to 1 minute. Although he has the weakness to buff, Caleb plans to use it in the remaining 3 seconds. So when his turn ends, the lightning strike spell fires properly. The boys recoil in bewilderment, amazed that their magician's spell didn't work. This girl herself does not understand how this is possible, because such an incident has never happened before. Caleb thanks his interlocutor for the fact that his head has now become clearer, but she is perplexed. And the guy says that his path is correct, and death is the only way out for bastards like her. The girl asks her opponent to stop, starting to say what she can do, but he is adamant. And he uses Dust Blast on her, getting the time hourglass. The opponents are amazed that this guy uses magic without full spells. And while they wonder what happened to the destroying spell, Caleb takes action. Using the step-by-step hourglass, he turns to killing Lust for help. Looking around carefully, the guy notices that the gnome's ability is to control dolls. This puts everything into place, explaining the 4 steps to Caleb. Using Lightning Strike, the boy asks Yurnil to shoot the dwarf. He himself uses Dust Explosion for the second time, but on a different enemy. When the action points are completely spent, the mage's turn ends, causing an explosion. The dwarf also gets it along with his puppet, causing the puppeteer to let out a stifled cry. The bewildered beastman tries to understand what is going on, but he is unable to do so. Meanwhile, he gets it too, along with the blood and pain, causing a sharply interrupted whine. Having committed an unpleasant act, the monk begins to pray silently, atoning for his sins while the trail is still fresh. The gnome begs his looming opponent to spare him between attempts to catch his breath. Caleb reminds him of his words from earlier, that now there will be no mercy for them. When someone else's magic wand hits the gnome's forehead, he starts thinking feverishly, getting scared out of his wits. Caleb, repeating the words that no one will ever expect any more hesitation from him, produces a lightning strike. Later, having dealt with the enemies, they make a fire, allowing themselves to rest. Yurnil mentally calls herself an idiot, believing that she has screwed up again. She orders herself to pull herself together because she must be a comrade she is not ashamed to be. Caleb apologizes for dozing off, assuming it was a side effect of the scroll. While saying he's fine, the guy suddenly notices something and asks what they're doing. The monk says they're simply sorting through the loot they took from the raiders, checking what might be useful to them specifically. Thinking about this, Caleb suggests taking only what they can really use. He points out 5 healing potions and 1 elixir that reduces recovery time. The guy is convinced that these raiders had really good things, including the Scroll of Resurrection. Caleb is initially surprised by the telekinesis, but quickly cools down, assuming it is just a trinket. While he is identifying the scroll, he thinks about this engraved magic wand, but just as quickly comes to the conclusion that this thing is meaningless. Addressing his team, Caleb suggests that they wrap things up and leave, and Yurnil agrees. But her sensitive hearing picks up something, and the elf asks Caleb to wait. She says cautiously that she hears something in the pouch on the leader's belt twitching. The guy has an idea of what it could be, since there aren't many other options. Yurnil confirms that this is the same sound, and Caleb shares that Professor Meldini gave him this compass. The boy remembers that this compass can lead them to treasure chests, the monk clarifies. Caleb confirms his interlocutor's words, but reminds his guys of their priority task. The guy suggests putting off the rest for later, and specifically asks Yurnil not to react so sharply to every rustle. The elf is despondent, believing that her hearing is her only virtue, but the guy retorts. After all, he believes that she is already capable of a lot. The blonde asks if she shouldn't pay attention to the sounds of water either, and Caleb laughs condescendingly. And then it suddenly dawns on him, and the guy clarifies, and Yurnil says that he hears a stream, or a fountain. An idea suddenly pops into Caleb's head and he shouts, asking where these sounds are coming from. To acquire skills for some classes, you need to look for randomly appearing fountains in the labyrinth. They are called Fountains of Blessing, and their origin is associated with fragments of the old gods. Caleb says they found such a fountain, thanks to Yurnil. The elf couldn't be happier that she was able to be useful to the team. The leader asks if the two would like to receive a blessing from the fountain. The monk recalls that he tried several times already, but still got nothing. Yurnil is still on his wave. Caleb thinks that in order to obtain a skill, certain conditions must be met. And he asks Ames if he has tried using his current weapon. The answer is vague. Caleb asks the man to just take his word for it and try it. And he mentally begins to calculate the monk's strength and level of mastery of the club. Ames doesn't say he wants to do it, but he agrees if his leader insists on it. Taking a deep breath before proceeding further, the monk plunges into the water. At first, the man closes his eyes tightly, feeling tense, but eventually relaxes. Emerging, he says incredulously that he actually has the skill. Caleb reminds him of his words and adds that he himself knew that Ames would be able to do it. While the man announces the name of his skill to everyone, the leader turns to Yurnil, saying that it is now her turn. When the elf dives into the water, Caleb begins to analyze her level and characteristics. Meanwhile, Yurnil announces that she now has a triple shot, and she invites the leader to try it too. The guy is at a loss when he says the words about how magicians cannot receive the fountain's blessing. But the elf insists, saying that until you try, you won't know. Caleb thinks about this, remembering that this is no longer a game, and no one has cancelled the experiments. Moreover, he becomes interested in finding out what is inside one of these fountains. A system notification appears before the guy's eyes about his use of the Fountain of Blessing. This is surprising, as is the ability to choose the starting skill of your weapon, the Hourglass. Time Raider allows you to spend 1 second to reduce the cooldown by 1 minute or a debuff. The Book of Memory Editor allows you to open the book and swap spell slots during your turn. The final option is the Mind Controller, which is currently active. Caleb doesn't understand what it is, because every skill gives him a headache. However, he believes that one shouldn't overdo it. He does not want to exclude those that will not be useful yet, and takes possession of the Direction Regulator. Yurnal expresses concern, saying that she thought Caleb was drowning, but he denies the latter. The hourglass activates, announcing to its owner the beginning of his turn. Checking his action points after waving his wand, the guy is satisfied, as they don't count as used. Finishing his turn, Caleb suggests they set out, and the elf agrees with her leader. The guy thinks that all they need to do is follow Bakek. It will be easier. He considers this method the best way to avoid traps, but Ames has his own thoughts. Noticing the shiny thing, Yurnil asks what it is. It turns out that this amulet was given to the man by his wife. The elf finds it romantic that the monk is married and learns that they met at the Adventurers Guild. Ames admits that it was this woman who helped him organize a group with Beck and allowed him to go on the current expedition. Yurnil admires the monk's wife, considering this woman incredible. The man says that this is why he must return safe and sound, but Caleb does not share his enthusiasm. Bakek, who was walking ahead of everyone, pauses and, shuffling, freezes in place. Looking ahead with interest, he makes a questioning, wheezing sound. And then, exclaiming something a little too excitedly, he takes off from his place, rushing forward. The puzzled elf asks where he ran, and the zombie, sharply turning the corner, falls to the ground, continuing to repeat the same sounds. Caleb understands what this is, believing that this is Bakek's instinctive reaction to the presence of his soul. As he thought about this, an idea began to form in the monk's mind. He believes that this is the very space between floors called the legendary floor and a half. Yurnil has never heard of such a thing. Ace admits that he thought it was just rumors spread by adventurers. Caleb supports the dialogue. And while he speaks, a very interesting sound is heard under the elf's feet. While apologizing to Caleb, Yurnil says that she thinks she stepped on something again, and the girl asks what they should do about it now. The monk asks Caleb to leave immediately, believing that the floor is about to collapse, but he is calm. And he asks everyone else to calm down, because, thanks to Yurnil, finding a way out turned out to be easier. At the same moment, clouds of air begin to emerge from the widening crack in front of them, and soon, step by step, the stairs rush down, marking the road. At the very end, when the entire process is completed, a portal opens, and the leader invites his team to visit the floor 1.5. Finding himself on the other side of the portal in turn, Yurnil freezes in place. What appears before the elf's eyes makes her let out a cry of delight. And all because the settlement spread out before the girl does not look like what is usually found in the labyrinth. She notices that the village looks ancient, and Caleb thinks that everything is exactly the same as in the game. Yurnil suggests that this is the reason why there is complete silence here. Caleb whispers that from now on, they need to move quietly so the guardians don't hear them. Border guards, being floor 1.5 monsters, tend to attack in swarms, which can easily end the game. Caleb says that if a fight breaks out, they will be at a disadvantage, so it is wiser to act quietly. He suggests simply quietly taking the reliquary with Bakek's soul and getting out of this place. The guy is confident that he won't get lost, since he has already played in this area in the game. Taking his next step, he says that they are already there. And this temple in front of travelers is called the Sanctuary of Souls. Touching the old tree, Caleb thinks that so far everything matches what he knows. And so far this place doesn't look dangerous, again, just like it did in the game. Once the team gets inside, they are greeted by a ringing silence, in which only their own footsteps can be heard. Seeing strange objects around, Yurnil asks what they are, and is told that they are all reliquaries. Ames also doesn't understand how Bakek's soul can be found among all this multitude, but Caleb has an answer. He is confident that the reliquary they need looks unique and unlike all the others. The monk has doubts that this vessel contains the very soul they need. Caleb confirms his confidence, adding that the reliquary needs to be moved to the first floor, and everything needs to be done there. The man finds this tempting and suggests starting right now. Yurnil turns to Caleb, asking him to wait a minute. She says there is another glowing reliquary, and he asks what they should do if there are already 2 of them. The monk refuses to believe it, because just a minute ago nothing was glowing in that place, and asks Caleb what's going on, assuming that the labyrinth master has just captured the soul of another adventurer. The guy is desperately looking for an answer to this question, because he considers himself the best newcomer on the first floor at the moment. And then Yurnil pulls him out of his thoughts, informing him that someone is running towards them. Turning around cautiously, the guy comes to the conclusion that some adventurer has just died on the 1.5 floor. The command to run is followed by a response that someone is not going to leave Austin behind. But the interlocutor thinks differently, because this guy is already dead, and they need to take care of their own lives. Intending to hide in a nearby temple, they unceremoniously burst inside. Caleb looks puzzled at the sight of the uninvited guests, recognition flickering in his eyes. Seeing his friend, the lizard Bernard, also cries out his name in amazement, and questioningly. The guy, already anticipating the consequences, feels regret, and the paladin begins to lecture him. He is amazed that the magician left the door open to such a dangerous place, and his interlocutor mentally counter-arguments. Saying that monsters are approaching, the lizard calls for everyone to begin preparing for battle. Caleb, again, mentally, says that it was Bernard, that idiot, who brought them here. Finally, the guy wearily asks what brought him to this place and hears that it is all the machinations of the Order. The lizard suggests that the reason for their meeting in this place is to overcome difficulties together. He considers what is happening to be a divine revelation from Nathaniel, part of her grand plan. Meanwhile, Bernard is approached and ordered to stop talking. The strong man tells the lizard to raise the barrier because the enemy is coming towards them right now. Frightened, Bernard meekly accepts his interlocutor's order. And the very next moment he activates the Palma barrier, placing his paw on the door. At the same time, Bernard says that they will end this battle with the demons right here. Turning to Caleb, the paladin asks him to provide assistance to their squad. The magician mentally curses his interlocutor because, according to the plan, they were supposed to do everything quietly. And, already turning to this damned, cursed labyrinth, he gives it a promise to survive until the very end. The boy asks out loud if Bernard could follow his order for a minute, but he sees no reason. And then Caleb tells him in color that it was the lizard who led all these monsters to the temple. The paladin agrees after considering his interlocutor's words for some time, and he allows himself to be given the order, because he himself dragged the guy into this. Caleb thinks that the plans need to be changed, and Bekek needs to be resurrected right in this temple. After all, in such a state it is simply impossible for them to escape, and first it is worth using Izulov's scroll to calm the undead. The boy speaks words about resting in peace in eternity, thinking that the priority is to protect Bekek. Caleb promises himself that this will not last long as he draws the power of necromancy from his body. Saying that he will lower the reliquary with telekinesis, the boy asks Yernal to catch it for him, and she agrees. As he lowers the vessel containing the soul, Caleb addresses the new arrivals, and he asks to tell him about their skills in order to develop some kind of strategy. Not everyone is thrilled with the idea, as this is an experienced group from the second floor, and its members only follow the orders of their leader, Bernard. Caleb clarifies if this is true, and he asks the lizard what his main strategy was for today. The paladin replies that it was a frontal breakthrough. The interlocutor reminds him of the results of this, and about the fact that in this way I had to lose a member of my group because he was not visible nearby. Bernard agrees for everyone, admitting that one of their comrades died very recently, and then a cunning plan comes into Caleb's head, part of which he begins to voice right now. The idea is to help these kids revive a member of their group if they behave obediently, and Caleb asks them to turn around, promising to prove that he is telling the truth, explaining that when someone dies between floors, their soul is automatically placed in the reliquary. Bernard asks if it is Austin, and his interlocutor answers in the affirmative, voicing alternatives. And then he adds that compensation will be paid later in the temple. The lizard still has doubts about this, and his comrade says that he will carry out all the instructions with all readiness if the words about the resurrection are true. He says he can shoot accurately, and the barbarian has a strong blow and the jump of a wild warrior. And this guy politely and wholeheartedly asks his interlocutor to return his comrade. Caleb, who was just waiting for this, with the same readiness expresses his agreement to help. He warns everyone that soon both the barrier and the gate will break. Therefore, they need to start as soon as possible, trying not to panic and keep their cool. Bernard recalls how the bishop invited him to his office, announcing an important commission from the church. The old man ordered the paladin to immediately go to the labyrinth to find out if the rumors about soul preservation were true. The church promised to give its warrior full support, so there was no room for failure. Now all these thoughts from the lizard's head have almost completely displaced the prayers to his goddess for the preservation of the life of his slave, and he asks her why she subjects him to such a cruel test. Caleb considers a frontal attack suicidal, as they are outnumbered, but staying inside is also not an option. And then the guy turns to Bernard, Ames, and Barbarian, asking them to move the cabinets behind him so that he can climb up. Yernal and Rimusuparan give the order to take the reliquaries, and they accept it without complaint. When they have completed the task, the monk announces its readiness by addressing his leader. He announces his intention to make a passage through the roof, asking everyone to move away from him for now. The spell that makes this plan come true turns out to be Dust Explosion, and at that very moment, a powerful discharge pierces the vault with just one blow, creating a hole in its place. Caleb tells everyone to get on the roof immediately and do it as quickly as possible. And while his order is being carried out, the guy himself is below to cover his comrades. Caleb turns to Ames and Bernard, calling them to action, urging them to hurry. But a sharp sound makes the guy turn around and start playing out a new plan in his head. The men also turn around, not wanting to lose sight of their enemies, who are already moving in their direction. In their heads too, like Caleb, they are looking for different options that are most beneficial for them. Ames, turning to his leader, asks him to move on, while he takes on the enemies himself, promising to restrain them as best he can. Paladin is now less verbose, instead activating Guardian's shield. When the monk enters the fight, the lizard allows himself a delay of only a couple of moments. And then he joins his unwitting comrade to help hold off the enemy. Looking at them, Caleb mentally admits with regret that they won't be able to hold out like this for long. And then he asks the guys to retreat and not to move too far forward. The lizard asks why. Caleb is afraid to say it out loud, but mentally he allows himself to hear the words about his appearance. And, literally a couple of moments later, like something out of a horror movie, a terrible grip descends heavily on the doorframe. Bernard screams out, involuntarily asking what the hell is going on. Seeing this giant monster, he tries to understand who he is and where he came from. Caleb again mentally replies that this creature is the administrator of the sanctuary, and his comrades are already noticing how many of the defeated monsters are beginning to regenerate. Caleb recalls that the main problem is the ability of this creature to restore every single one of its subordinates. Turning to Barbarian, the guy asks him to go down and help his comrades, simply buying time for the others. Although puzzled, the man agrees, asking to leave this matter to him. Meanwhile, Urnil rushes to his leader, calling him worriedly. When she says that she will go too, determination flashes in the elf's eyes. The leader agrees, asking her to take care of herself, and Urnil agrees with this. Remus asks her to succeed, saying that he is counting on her. The elf promises to do everything in her power. Caleb, already mentally, adds that he believes in Urnil, knowing that she can handle it. And all because the entire success of this mission now depends only on the elf. And she, without turning around to look at her friends, although she really wants to, hurries in the necessary direction. The administrator grants restoration, buffs, and aura magic to the undead, and inflicts debuffs with his stench. Telling all this to his friend, the guy asks him to remain on guard at all costs. Bernard remembers these words perfectly, but, as often happens, it is easier said than done. The barbarian curses, asking how many more like them they have to kill. Suddenly, his peripheral vision catches movement from the enemy, and he once again revives his allies, causing an unpleasant feeling inside due to the inevitability of what is happening. When a new wave of previously defeated opponents rushes into battle, Bernard experiences confusion. The clubs spreading from the administrator hypnotize the lizard, and he cannot even regain the ability to communicate clearly. The barbarian, noticing this, shouts to his comrade, ordering him to get ready. And then, as quickly as possible, he flies up to him to deflect the blow that was too close. He tells him not to get distracted, as they are too far from finished, and the lizard apologizes, citing the stench. Caleb now realizes how stupid the frontal attack was, but he can't believe he realized it so late. Watching the battle from afar, he at the same time tries to snatch the returned elf from all these bodies. And the puzzled lizard, not yet fully recovered, wonders what's wrong with this guy. And the monk continues to strike blow after blow, not paying attention to his surroundings. He sees only the enemies approaching him. This battle makes Bernard think of certain things that he is unable to voice. Namely, how is that monk still in perfect order? And the lizard decides. Getting closer, he, overcoming his pride, asks how Ames can resist this stench. The man responds by saying that he was taught this on Dalai Mountain. This technique is called the art of silence within the mind, and the lizard is delighted with the new knowledge. The administrator at this moment points his staff at the fallen undead, preparing to put his strategy into action. Noticing this, Caleb turns to Ames and warns the monk about the creature's intentions. But it is too late, as the fallen begin to stir under the influence of the spell's charms. The monk doesn't want to just stand there idly, and begins to recite the skill activation words. It turns out to be his newly acquired skill, Smashing Gaia. The men are confused, wondering when Ames managed to learn such a technique. At this moment, Remus hears a sound behind him and turns around to look at it. Finally convinced that this is the signal they need, he turns to Caleb. Notifying him of the flare, the leader, in turn, addresses the others. Telling them to retreat, Caleb mentally praises the elf for following her instructions correctly and for her timeliness. Urnil, meters away, tells this half-bald man to wake up. He, staring at the stranger in bewilderment, asks who she is. Caleb thinks that now it's their turn to buy time. The range of his dust is limited, so they need to detonate it manually. The guy comes to the conclusion that there is only one way out and stops time. When he activates explosive dust 4 times in a row, his action points are exhausted and the turn ends. They will drop debris on the administrator and his guards to stop the enemies. Remus, stunned by the overabundance of emotions, cannot even express his amazement at this out loud, and Caleb is already starting to put his plan into action. The administrator, hearing the rumble of stones from the collapsing temple, turns around worriedly, and those, falling down very close at the same moment, crush his comrades. Bernard didn't expect such a maneuver, which is why he is now trying to understand what just happened. Caleb urges him on, saying that this is their chance, but they need to act quickly. The barbarian echoes the boy, and Bernard, agreeing, tells him to save himself first. And at that very moment, with a piercing screech, an enemy flies out from the rising dust at them. But Bernard was prepared for this, so the undead parted with life from the enemy mace. The The paladin says he will hold off these creatures, ordering the monk to go forward. He, contrary to common sense, refuses because the wound is still too fresh. A painfully familiar image appears before the monk's eyes, causing his heart to ache. And just as quickly, it is replaced by an alternative, intensifying the feelings and making him feel guilt more clearly. Before he starts speaking, the man tries to control his overwhelming feelings. And then he says that he will not run away again, not to leave his comrades abandoned to their fate. Shouting out that he won't do it again, Ames rushes to back up his words. Leaving behind a stunned Bernard, the monk tells him to go away, promising that he will sort everything out himself. He, although seriously puzzled, reluctantly agrees, realizing that his interlocutor cannot be dissuaded so easily. And finally, the lizard admits that Ames is the best of all the vanguards he has ever seen. Several guardians rush after the paladin, but the monk shields his comrade with his body, blocking the enemy's path. And then, with a war cry, he rushes at the one standing closest and swings his club. But Caleb makes him stop, saving him from at least serious injury. The guy tells the monk to get up too, promising to cover him while this happens. And at that very moment, the sound of crashing stones is heard nearby, and the dark part of the temple is illuminated by a magical light. Caleb's eyes widen, momentarily taken aback by what it is. But the guy quickly comes to his senses, alerting his team that the administrator has returned and the guardians are about to surround them. Caleb screams again, telling Ames to run as quickly as possible. The man asks the elf to slow down, to which she remarks that they don't have time for that. He reminds Yrnil that he just died and came back to life, and she replays the recent events in her head, where she cast a spell over him, pouring potions on him and completing either a revival or a healing. So now she reminds the man about this, and he says that this is not enough for full recovery. Then the elf says that if they don't hurry, all their comrades will be in mortal danger, and it works. Before firing the projectile, Remus warns his companions to be careful. And Caleb, at about the same time, performs a lightning strike, covering Ames from the other side. Bernard, saying that time is running out, asks his interlocutor to hand him his weapon. And the monk obediently follows the advice of the lizard, and he pulls him towards himself. Caleb, noticing the enemy getting closer again, provides support to his allies with his lightning strike. Remus is not far behind, also proving to be very useful and efficient. Paladin offers Ames to take his hand, and he immediately grabs it. But suddenly he becomes puzzled, wondering what could have gone wrong. Thinking that his ankle is frozen, the man lowers his head. The administrator's mouth stretches into a grin, beginning to spew out a sinister laugh. Remus swears with annoyance that they were very close, and offers his interlocutor a fun game. He doesn't feel the slightest fear at the sight of the projectile heading towards him, continuing to laugh. And even more so, when performing its maneuver, this monster makes the shooter tense up. Saying that it is all over, the paladin asks the monk to hold on tight. He remains silent, mentally answering that he can't do it anymore. His hands are already unbearably sore, ready to loosen their grip at any moment. But Bernard is not going to leave his comrade so easily, and, with the intention of saving him, asks him not to let go of his hand. Ames says it's too late and asks everyone to just leave, assuring them that he will be okay. Caleb starts shouting, ordering his interlocutor to use the dagger now. And in the air, following the words, double magic swords fly, causing the monk's surprise. Cutting right into the center of the administrator's mask, the blade forces him to open his grip. And with renewed strength, the lizard begins to encourage Ames, urging him to get up. Making a wheezing sound as it flew, the administrator fell silent upon reaching the ground. Once Ames is safe, he is praised for working so hard. And the man is asked to greet someone properly. When he hears a painfully familiar voice, he cannot believe that it is reality. When Ames asks in disbelief if it is who he thinks it is, there is a few agonizing moments of silence. And then this boy admits that he doesn't understand what's going on at all. Looking around suspiciously, Beck asks his adopted brother where they are. And when he asks about the strangers surrounding them, the man can no longer bear it and jumps up from his seat. Ames pounces on the younger boy, causing him to yelp in surprise. And then he begins to lament, giving praise and glory to the Lord God. Beck barely manages to say the words about how he can't breathe because of the tight hug. And he shouts, turning to the monk, calling for reason, because he does not want to be left with broken bones. At the same time, a familiar voice is heard nearby, attracting Caleb's attention. The elf informs him that they have just arrived at the appointed place. The stranger next to her, having caught his breath a little, also spoke up. And now his comrades, overjoyed, confirm the fact of Austin's return. The barbarian, trying to hide his tears, congratulates this idiot on his return. Austin asks why he didn't run away from there, and how he ended up there, calling his interlocutor a dumbass. And Caleb, by ruining the wonderful reunion, reminds them that this is not the end. This is especially true for the elf, who should not draw attention to her person. She apologizes. Turning to Yrnil, the guy says that now he will tell her the plan of action. So you need to listen to it very carefully and share it with Austin. To begin with, the guy talks about the distance from the roof of the temple to the ground and from it to the portal of the gate. And at the same time, he warns that jumping from the roof would be a real suicide. In his mind, the guy thinks that due to their lack of dexterity, the monk and the lizard will simply break their legs this way. Yurnal shares with Austin her concerns about getting injured and possibly being surrounded by guardians. The first priority is the safety and neutralization of the sentries and their commander. To do this, you will have to resort to strong magic, which will require additional time. Caleb also asks to deal with the monsters that are trying to get up there so that they don't get in the way. The barbarian, clicking his tongue, remarks that they don't really have a choice as such. And with alacrity, the man strikes the intruder, sending him back down. Promising to deal with them, he hears Caleb's objection and words about there being another task for him. The magician is going to leave this task to Bernard and Beck Eck. The lizard accepts the order. While apologizing to the stranger, the redhead notes that this guy is not his leader. The adventurers who have already been through this unanimously tell Beck to obey the magician. He expresses incomprehension, but the monk gently says that at the moment, Caleb is their overall leader. Remus asks if there is a way to deal with them all, and his interlocutor talks about holding back enemies with the power of massive lightning magic. After this, Caleb turns to Yurnal, and the elf readily responds to his call. The guy asks her to take Austin with her and, going to the gate, hide. At this time, the blonde hands everything over to the man and asks him to surround the temple with an earthen magical wall. Urging him, the elf rushes forward, and her interlocutor follows her example. Noticing that the hourglass has rebooted, Caleb mentally tells himself to begin. Taking a confident step forward, he approaches the very edge, looking inquiringly at the enemies huddled below. In his mind, he confirms his assumptions that their leader is smart. Instead of climbing onto the roof or breaking it down, they surround the building, blocking all escape routes. However, even in this case, Caleb has a plan, and what he means is not something one can prepare for in the place of one's enemies. And with the thought that this is definitely not what they were expecting, Caleb summons the thunderclouds. This summoning magic brings down heavy rain on the clouds and lasts for 30 seconds with a 15-second cooldown. Caleb mentally repeats to himself the words that these clouds are now about to collapse in a powerful downpour. In this case, an earthen wall must be used to hold back the water. Having spent all his points, the boy orders himself to immediately turn over his hourglass. Thanks to this, there will now be a total of 7 thundercloud spells. And at the moment when his turn ends, everyone turns their eyes to the sky that begins to crack. Enemies also experience confusion with such a sudden change in weather, and the emotional barbarian and Bernard ask in one voice what it is. Austin also becomes very curious about where this sudden storm came from. While Caleb continues to implement his plan, this time by creating a lightning bolt. Austin can't believe the abundance of clouds, as he's never seen anything like it before. And at that very moment, a powerful bolt of lightning strikes from the sky towards the enemies, causing the man to flinch. Yurnal reminds him of the construction of the earthen wall, and his interlocutor also comes to his senses. Memories of a silent, brilliant first-level magician come to mind, which cannot help but amaze me. But he is no fool himself, and by calling on the stone to rise up, the man calls on the earthen wall. Rising in a circle, it surrounds exactly the part that was required. Saying that he said what the elf asked him to, Austin asks about the next plan. Hearing the words that barbarian should be the first to cross, the man does not understand what his interlocutor is talking about. And then his comrade-in-arms performs the barbarian warrior's long leap. And from his height he asks Austin to move aside as quickly as possible. He doesn't make it in time, but the man still manages to land skillfully and even spectacularly. Caleb, watching from his position, finds the landing quite successful. He turns to Ames, asking him to act as he explained. The man promises to do everything in his power. Caleb then asks Bernard to use his radiance power on the monk. The paladin carries out his leader's order without complaint, immediately casting a spell on Ames. He, feeling the changes that have already begun to occur in his body, notes that his strength has increased by 3. Without warning, the man grabs Remus, causing him to yelp in displeasure. And when he asks the monk to wait to prepare his heart, the words are already lost in the vibrations of the air. Ames, swinging harder, throws the boy as far as possible. He, with a cry full of horror, almost reaches the arms of Varvara on the other side, and he rhetorically reports that he managed to successfully catch the shorty. Turning to the monk, Bernard tells him that he relies on him, and he nods in acceptance. A cry of acceptance is heard from the other side, and the lizard politely asks his interlocutor to take care of the luggage. Looking down, Bakek admits that he has become curious about something. Namely, if this magic is so powerful, why couldn't Caleb catch these monsters right away? He agrees that it might have worked on the sentinels, but not on the main thing. Asking to listen to this sound, the guy says that it is the leader of the monsters trying to break through the wall. And if he succeeds, the sentinels will join the fight again, which means he needs to get out quickly. Caleb says there isn't much time left before both spells wear off. He orders that after he himself finds himself on the other side, these two follow. And when everything is ready for the crossing, the guy thinks that it is scarier than he thought. He asks Ames to throw it softly at the same time as the monk's actions. And now his frightened cry is already lost in the air, causing everything inside to shrink. And when the barbarian below asks him to fly to him, it becomes even more frightening. Yurnal expresses his admiration for his interlocutor, saying that it was a wonderful plan. She is happy that they will soon be able to finally get out of this place after being fully reunited. Beck wonders where they found such an amazing magician, and in general, what is happening around is amazing. The interlocutor invites the redhead to join Caleb's team after they get out. After all, with such a past, everyone will be afraid to take Beck into the team, especially with the mark of the Master of the Labyrinth. The boy doesn't understand what they're talking about, and the monk continues talking about Caleb accepting him. Beck expresses understanding and reminds that there is very little time left. Ames says that's exactly what it's about, continuing to recruit the kid to Caleb's team. Beck thinks that his friend is acting strangely, and he calls on him, if he understood, to move forward. And the kids, as the leader ordered, perform the shadow jump together. The barbarian happily announces that Beck, Eck, and Ames are also already here. Caleb is glad that everyone managed to get out of this unpleasant situation successfully, and literally, the next moment the earthen walls effect ends. But now this is not important. It is much more important for everyone to go to the gates as soon as possible. Not wanting to remain on the 1.5 floor, or further, everyone passes through the portal with delight. When the last of the companions reaches this side, Yurnal cries out in joy. Delighted that they managed to do it, Remus joins her. The barbarian is most impressed by the fact that they managed to resurrect Austin, who is also grateful to the young magician. And while everyone is rejoicing and praising Caleb, the paladin stands aside silently. He praises the guy mentally, amazed that this young man was able to come up with a brilliant plan so quickly. At the same time, the lizard celebrates the success of the mission entrusted to him by the religious order. After all, the fact that Austin was resurrected is proof of the existence of the soul preservation system. But it wasn't their team that completed this mission, which means they didn't do anything in this adventure. And what's more, if they hadn't met Caleb's team, they wouldn't have been able to get out of there alive. Bernard thinks that the goddess brought him to this guy to save him and teach him a lesson, to help him realize his inadequacy. The paladin is brought out of his gloomy thoughts by a sharp cry and groans of pain. A worried Beck asks his comrade in arms what happened to him. The boy screams in fear and begins to talk about what happened to the monk's leg. And Caleb, seeing this with his own eyes, is also deeply perplexed. The guy mentally tries to understand when this could have happened, making assumptions in his head about the nature of the wound. Destructive Ray is a third-class necromancy that destroys the heart and causes quick death. An image immediately pops into my head, which, apparently, is the cause of the terrible wound. Caleb asks why Ames remained silent, and he retorts that it wouldn't have changed anything. Beck asks his friend not to pretend, remembering how well he jumped from the roof of the temple. Remus asks Bernard to do something since he is a paladin, but he says he is helpless. Ames says he has a favor to ask Caleb to give the amulet to his wife. Remembering his promise, the man also asks to say that he is sorry that he was unable to fulfill it. Just as the guy is about to take the amulet, his interlocutor's hand falls with a crash. The guy is puzzled, because he didn't even allow for something like this in his ideal plan. And Yurnal, turning to his friend, informs him that the monk's heartbeat is becoming weaker and weaker. The paladin begins to pray to his goddess, and an awkward silence falls around. Caleb mentally orders himself to think, because for now, the man is still alive. Going over the recent events in his head, the guy remembers that the raiders had something useful. He also recalls the words that someone died on the 1.5 floor. A glimmer of hope lights up in the boy's eyes as he considers the possibility that this might work. Throwing the man over himself, he orders Yurnal and Bakek to follow him. And he mentally urges himself on, reminding himself that they don't have that much time. Bernard only has time to ask the already disappearing Caleb what he is going to do. But he no longer hears the paladin, as he falls out on the other side of the gate portal. Noticing that Ames is still breathing, the guy is glad that he can still make it in time. But then, the hairs on his back stand on end, foreshadowing something bad, and Caleb turns around abruptly. A thought crossed his mind that the sentinels were already waiting for them at the entrance to the gate. Glancing at Ames, the boy notices a barely noticeable flash of light that separates from the man's body. And she, jumping swiftly, rushes behind the administrator's back, already shining there. Caleb speculates that it is in this reliquary that the monk's soul is currently located. Footsteps are heard behind him, and the next moment 2 silhouettes appear next to the guy. Yurnal promises to cover for his friend, and Beck asks if he has a plan. The guy responds by announcing his intention to revive Ames's soul. In response to this, Beck also wants to say something, but Caleb forbids it, asking him to just wait. And, saying that, first of all, the attackers need to be stopped, the guy asks to hold out for 13 seconds. At this moment, the guards are already running towards them, throwing out shrill curses. Keeping them from getting close to him and his allies, Caleb fires Dust Explosion. Before the haze has time to clear, silhouettes of enemies begin to emerge from it. But this maneuver turns out to be irrational due to the punishment that befell the sentinels. There are 9 seconds left before the hourglass recharges, but Caleb is wasting no time. It seems to him that time is dragging on very slowly, and he is afraid that they will not be able to hold out. The guy's thoughts are interrupted by a male voice addressing him. A second one is heard from behind. Bernard says he can't let the guy die until he gets his reward from Nathaniel. The guy smiles and thinks that for the first time he is glad to see this lizard who loves to chat so much. A battle of endurance ensues between them and the Sentinels with the administrator again. Caleb says that no matter how he sees it, it's pure madness. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't put his life on the line, but now it was the only way to save the monk. And, thinking that this is a chance not to be missed, Caleb notices that the hourglass has just become available. He asks Beck to jump out of the ambush to the administrator, steal his staff, and return. Rizik starts talking about the possibility of stealing this item, but he is interrupted, asked to trust. By activating the hourglass, Caleb plans to use telekinesis to lift the reliquary. He notes that telekinesis takes away action points equal to the time for that turn. Therefore, he needs to slowly and carefully fit into exactly 4 intervals. In his mind, the boy turns to Ames, remembering how he saved their team many times. Now it's the leader's turn to save his subordinate, but he needs to hold out a little longer to do so. Screaming that he will not let him die, Caleb orders Yurnal to shoot the administrator with the lightning arrow. This way, all action points are used up and the mage's turn comes to an end. And then Caleb gives the order to Beck Ek, and Yurnal thinks about his special arrows. Although she bought them before entering the labyrinth, she didn't think she would use them in this way. And when the unsuspecting administrator begins to writhe in pain, Beck arrives. Finding himself right behind the monster, the guy, at his own risk, uses steel. And then, like a swift arrow, he exhales, rushing past his allies. Informing the others that preparations are complete, Caleb orders everyone to return. While running, Bernard looks back to cover his comrades, if necessary. Fortunately, this doesn't happen, and once on the other side of the portal, everyone brings their breathing back to normal. Caleb asks, just in case, if anyone else has fatal injuries or curses. But everything seems to be fine, and then the lizard asks what the guy is going to do. After all, there is no scroll of resurrection, and Bernard offers to continue the revival by returning from the labyrinth. But then the reliquary breaks, and Caleb gently counters, saying there is another way. One of the secret rooms in the labyrinth is the treasure room. These chests have a high chance of containing the items adventurers desire most. As he reaches into another chest, Caleb tells himself that he will definitely succeed this time. And indeed, the scroll of resurrection that they so desperately needed appears in his hand, causing Bernard's amazement. The lizard can't believe that Caleb even planned this, amazed at his knowledge of the labyrinth. The guy suggests to his comrades to start, since now they have everything ready. They begin to read a spell that will help the dead body to resurrect. But in order to cure Ames, you first have to turn him into a zombie. And right now, Caleb is speaking the words for the revival of the undead, offering to plunge the future risen dead into eternal sleep. The staff must be used to remove the curse, then remove the necromancy, and return the soul to the human body. And finally, you will need to use that same scroll of resurrection. Inhaling sharply, the man, stumbling with unaccustomed speech, asks what it is. Giving the amulet back to Ames, Caleb asks him to return the item to his wife himself. Bernard says he learned a lot from the boy, inviting him back to the temple of Nathaniel. In order to collect the reward, the guy agrees to this, promising to come. Austin says he owes Caleb's team something, and he plans to repay the guy even at the cost of his own life. The guy refuses, asking not to mention it again, even as a joke. The guys say goodbye to Caleb until the next meeting in the city, and he becomes thoughtful. Even though they messed everything up, the guy ended up getting more than he wanted. Yurnal turns to Caleb, offering to continue his journey as well. But he refuses, saying that he is not finished here with the treasure chests yet. The elf says that she already looked inside, and there is only useless junk and some kind of trash. Ames says this is only for the newbie in the labyrinth, but there may be treasure among this junk. Caleb agrees that there may be useful things there, not what the adventurers expect. Cool items, a couple of which can almost certainly be found in such chests. The efforts are crowned with success, and the guy's gaze catches on something truly interesting. It turns out to be a blank scroll, which allows you to enchant it, creating any scroll you want. There is also a decent-looking dagger that can be appraised or given to Beck Ek. But that's not all. Caleb is once again able to discern value in the depths of the tree. Although, on the other hand, coins, even ancient ones, have always been commonplace among trash. And yet, for some reason, Caleb cannot let go of the find. Its pattern seems familiar to him. And then the thought of a village between the first and second floors bursts into his head. After all, the flag of this settlement had exactly the same image. The guy realized this only now, because the image in the game was too small to see it. From this, he concludes that all these things are from that village, and he is going to show the coin to Isilov. Saying he is finished, Caleb invites the others to continue on their way. Handing the ribbon to Yurnal, he says that he is giving it to her, and the elf clarifies the purpose of this item. Caleb remembers that she didn't like it when Beck chewed her hair. The redhead is perplexed. And he says that he wouldn't chew this greasy hair, but the elf protects it. But Beck isn't about to let his saliva comment go unanswered. And Yurnal seriously thinks about the words about disgust during hair loss while eating. Caleb turns to the girl in his mind, amazed that she can be so easily deceived. The elf reluctantly says that everything is fine as long as Beck doesn't do it again, and he continues to become aggressive when told that there is no need to spread dirty rumors. While securing the ribbon, the elf says that she has a question for Bakek about the name, and, without waiting for an answer, she asks what the guy's real name is. He, after a theatrical pause, says that this is his real name. Yurnal is about to burst out laughing, but she manages to hold back, even though the girl's intentions are easy to read. Rizek tells her not to mock him, saying that he personally chose and changed the name like a real thief. And the guy turns to Caleb for support, asking him if this isn't true. The brunette asks his interlocutor not to ask him, otherwise he will definitely not be able to restrain himself. Later, Beck asks to follow him exactly, because there are many traps in this corridor. And Caleb mentally rejoices at how convenient it is to have such a thief on his team. With his sensitive hearing, Yurnal picks up a suspicious sound and asks Caleb to wait. And the next moment he skillfully eliminates several goblins with one volley. Now she suggests continuing on, and Caleb is amazed at the girl's unexpectedly acquired courage. Yurnal expresses a suspicion that the labyrinth is changing, and she says that she heard the sound of a door opening nearby, and then calls her to follow her. Meanwhile, Caleb begins to feel useless, unlike the others. The ringing of Saint's bell alerts its inhabitants that the first-floor gates have been opened. Abandoning the task she had just begun, the novice immediately rushes to the designated place. Bernard tells his interlocutor that this journey was touching, and he informs them that he needs to convey a report on their mission to the Temple of Nathaniel. Meanwhile, the bell rings again, signaling the second opening of the same gates. The paladin is puzzled, amazed at such a quick repetition, since they themselves only just arrived. And he is amazed that Caleb and his team returned so quickly, but is glad that they are okay. The guy explains their quick return by saying that they were lucky to find a way out. But he falls silent, without saying what he wanted next, realizing who is in front of him. The guy turns to Ames, advising him to run away quickly, because his wife is probably completely exhausted. And it reminds us that the man was going to personally give the pendant to his beloved. These words have a sobering effect, and the monk rushes towards the woman with all his might. She, jumping into his arms, expresses joy that her husband has returned home safe and sound. She says she was worried when they told her the pendant was fake and apologizes, saying she didn't know. To sum up, the woman concludes that a real miracle happened to her. Beck says he would also like to say hello to his daughter-in-law, but he is advised not to ruin the reunion. Later, Yurnal goes to the slave maintenance department of the Adventurers Guild. And, after some time, looking at the treasured letters, he cannot believe his happiness. She finally received her certificate that she was now a free person. The joy of the happy moment is interrupted by Caleb, who says that this is not entirely true yet. After all, she still has debts from the clothes her boyfriend bought her to the food he fed her. The elf says that if she has to become Caleb's slave, then she doesn't mind at all. He mentally condemns the girl for such words because he was joking and she is spouting such nonsense. Beck mocks the blonde for being a slave, and such a cheap one at that, but she retorts. The boy finds a hole in this argument, and then Caleb comes to his friend's aid. And he says that the redhead himself is not free, because right now he is classified as a boss monster. If we reclassify him as a human, he will already be deceased, which also needs to be corrected. While the boy expresses hesitant understanding, an elf nearby bursts into laughter. She mocks the fact that he is not even a living person, and the interlocutor asks her a question. He asks what he needs to do to make them believe him, and then suggests fixing everything as quickly as possible. Yurnal laughs, saying that Caleb will first go to the Magic Academy to report on the success of the expedition. Excited voices can be heard on the city streets, delighted by the revived guy. Caleb admits to himself that he didn't think so many people would gather. Moreover, he didn't even imagine that they would all flock to this very place. Red asks hesitantly what this crowd is, and from its depths, someone calls out to Caleb. Landiford loudly asks the boy where the soul vault is. He replies that everything is as he expected. It is located in the village between the floors. Conversations about this begin. People are amazed at least by the power of the boss of that place. And Caleb notes to himself that it turns out that quite a few adventurers knew about the 1.5 floor. Lindiford says that he once almost died by entering there by accident. Vertinen, greeting Caleb and saying that Emma told him everything, expresses admiration. Those who heard the details and were hungry for them began to vie with each other to clarify the details. Caleb silently asks Vertinen to stop making a mountain out of a molehill. Later, while examining the object, Isilov asks about its former owner. Caleb says that this staff has access to a spell called Restore Undead. Observing the professor's surprise, the boy mentally understands what caused it. Isilov admits that he thought the expedition would take months. The man apologizes to the student because he completed an A-rank mission. Giving Caleb the staff, the professor instructs him to use this thing wisely. It will still come in handy. And Isilov also asks the guy to think about what he would like to receive as a reward for the mission. Just as Caleb agrees, there is an insistent knock on the door. Bursting in uninvited, Meldini says he rushed here as soon as he heard the news. Hearing the words that the temple of Nathaniel is in an uproar, Isilov clarifies the details. Meldini replies that it's all about competition, since their student's success was resounding. The old man asks the boy to tell him everything, without missing a single detail, and he becomes tense. Meanwhile, in the temple, Nathaniel asks his interlocutor to repeat what he just said. The cardinal is again told about the monk who was brought to the 1.5 floor on the verge of death. While his soul was preserved in the reliquary, the scroll of resurrection was found in the treasury. Hearing the words that Bakek was also resurrected, Servan asks how this is possible. He says he finds it hard to believe that all of this was pulled off by an ordinary first-level mage. Egil admits that he himself would not have been able to come up with such an inventive method. Servan believes that the use of necromancy puts them in a difficult position. He thinks about the only reason they tolerated the undead and provided the resurrection scrolls. It was the support of Isilov's project, and Haran was the main institution responsible for souls. This same incident could lead to significant changes in the temple's policies and operations. Suddenly, the cardinal shifts focus, asking how Paladin Bernard is doing. They tell him that he looks very depressed. He even wrote that he did not contribute to the mission. He said that if it weren't for the magician who resurrected the dead team member, they wouldn't have gotten out of there. Bernard claims that he himself could not do anything, and gave his share of the payment to the others. The cardinal says that his sadness breaks his heart and asks the bishop to comfort the paladin. As if by the way, Servan asks the name of that magician, saying that he would like to observe him. Asking why it took him so long, Yernil admits that Caleb made her worry. The guy thinks about how this persistent Meldini kept him near him for 2 hours. When the elf asks if he is okay, Caleb answers with complete agreement. And soon a voice is heard from ahead, saying that its owner was waiting for this guy. Clarence says Avison has recovered, so their family is throwing a party today. The boy expresses the greatest respect to his brother's benefactor, to which the latter thanks his interlocutor. Saying that Yernil is also Avison's benefactor, he asks permission to join them. Clarence doesn't mind at all. On the contrary, his family will consider the abundance of guests an honor. Allowing them to come to them together, the guy turns around and leaves. Caleb asks the elf what's wrong with Bakek, but at first she doesn't understand what the guy means. And then he says that he left because he couldn't stand the constant presence of the magician staring at him. Caleb deduces that they will be at the party together, and suggests that Yernil go. The elf says she is excited because this is her first invitation to a party, and the guy mentally rejoices at the sight of such a happy Yernil. But then she belatedly cries out, asking what they will wear to the reception with the noble gentleman. Even as he approaches the Britvan estate, Caleb notices the extraordinary beauty of this place. The doorman, politely apologizing, asks how they got in. The guy talks about an invitation to a party. The interlocutor apologizes again, realizing that these are their guests, and explains that people often come here in search of a mentor. Caleb attributes it all to the fact that he, unlike Yernil, came in his training uniform. When the gatekeeper asks to see their IDs, the elf is fired up with enthusiasm. The slightly puzzled guard says that he will report them, writing down the names of these gentlemen. In this way, he sends a message so as not to leave his workplace. Having received approval, the gatekeeper lets the couple through, and the first thing they hear is music. Seeing all this pomp, Caleb mentally admits that he came here for only 2 reasons. First, he wants to personally study the mages and high society, and receive a reward for resurrecting Avison. And secondly, the guy needs to take a very close look at one magician. And of course, it is Professor Amber from his own magical academy. After all, Caleb remembers very well the day when he pulled a little prank on Meldini. And to this day, the gloating face of that man never leaves his memory. The moment the student called the professor a bastard, a voice nearby is heard addressing Caleb, glad that he has come. Clarence wonders how long ago it was, since he hasn't even received notice of it yet. The guy says it just happened, and the message was sent using magic. Clarence says that sometimes there are delays, and asks Avison to say hello to his savior. He thanks her, becoming delighted because he really wanted to see his classmate. Recalling recent events, Avison asks how Caleb managed to improve his skills so much. But the interlocutor is more interested in the guy's condition. He shares the results of the treatment taking place in the temple. And the boy's mother admits that she had long wanted to visit Caleb to express her gratitude. She is pleased to hear that he and Avison have gotten along. Caleb adds that he doesn't have any friends at the academy yet. The woman offers to show their guest the house, which makes the boy immensely happy. As he walks away, Caleb thinks that this is only to his advantage, since he should understand the structure of the estate. Amazed that there is even an elevator here, the guy praises Avison's house, who is surprised by this. Caleb notes to himself that he already has a rough idea of the structure of this estate. He assumes that the elf had formed approximately the same opinion, and that means now is the perfect time to put the plan into action. Caleb greets the professors, and Meldini greets the pride of their academy, Avison, in return. The boy hesitates, saying that Caleb fits that description better, but the professor retorts. And, asking not to be so modest, he notes that they are both still in their first year. The old man turns to Professor Amber for support, but he gives a vague answer. And he asks how difficult it was to find the scroll of resurrection at the most necessary moment. Caleb chuckled to himself, thinking that he had been expecting this question for a long time. After all, Bernard and the temple do not talk about the existence of the compass because information about legendary artifacts is carefully hidden. Caleb knows that if word gets out about this, serious problems could arise. The guy is sure that only one person knows about the existence of this thing. That's why he now says out loud that it was just pure luck. Meldini appreciates this answer, mentally adding that it is all thanks to him, and he is proud of Caleb. Amber, on the other hand, experiences the opposite emotions, feeling offended that such information is being kept secret from him. But in the end, he himself suggests changing the topic, saying that, in fact, he is interested in many things. When asked about creating thunderclouds, Caleb replies that he combined 3 first-level spells. But his interlocutor is confident that this is not something that you can just think of, and everything will work out. Caleb grins and endures the intrigue, during which Amber thinks the guy is about to crack. But he again replies that it really is all about luck. Amber even loses face for a moment from such blatant impudence. After all, there is no room for luck in spell combinations. Even Professor Meldini knows this. Moreover, this boy did not come even a little bit closer to the professor's level. This makes it even more unclear how he can possess the knowledge of the one who invented this spell. The man continues to stare at his opponent, trying to understand what the matter is, and he comes to the conclusion that the guy could have killed the possessor of otherworldly powers from the Yoho tribe. This prompts me to ask permission to ask Caleb one more question, and Amber asks if the guy plans to continue relying on luck alone. In response, the man hears words about how he plans to always rely on his luck. The professor's lips involuntarily stretch into a smile as he expresses his understanding, and, leaving, the man politely apologizes, citing the fact that he still has things to do. Caleb thinks he has successfully overcome the complexity the developers intended. He monopolized information that other professors had never encountered before. And now Amber knows that the magician, who is not yet a professor, knows more than him. Activating the hourglass, the boy gives Urnal the order to follow Professor Ember, and after that, report to him about who this man met with and what they talked about. Knocking on the door with a special code, he says that he has brought important news. The interlocutor reminds us that he has already spoken about his lack of interest in cooperation. Amber doesn't give up, saying that this is about Caleb, and this guy knows more than they thought. The man suggests that the Yoho tribe's professor completed the difficult levels faster than they did. Caleb now has the knowledge of a wise player, although it seems he has not yet revealed all his cards. Amber continues, saying that she sees this as an opportunity and offers to lure the guy over to her side. When asked whether he should be recognized as a professor, he denies it, since Caleb is close to Meldini. Amber feels it necessary to request a meeting upstairs, because if she delays, something irreparable could happen. Specifically, this will mean that Black Dog will get to Caleb. Later, the boy himself, retelling Urnal's story, thoughtfully savors these words about the Black Dog. The elf is ashamed of having eavesdropped and makes excuses, but Caleb says everything is fine. He thinks that he has already heard about this criminal group, but does not understand why they need it. The fact that Amber finds the situation awkward suggests that there are also possessed people in the dog, and it doesn't look like they get along with the possessed at the Magic Academy. He is distracted from his thoughts about the need for more information by a general greeting. Avison's father talks about the reason why they are all gathered here today, and thanks the guests. Edward says that there are 2 adventurers here today who rescued his youngest son. He introduces the mage Caleb and the ranger Urnal to general approval. Edward announces that he has prepared something special as a reward. And he says that for today's celebration, they have prepared a small, entertaining game. It's called The Message Lost in the Labyrinth, and requires both magical and witty skills. To get started, you need to split into teams of 3 and use a spell to transmit messages. The team that finds the exit scroll and gets out first will be the winner. The choice of class is not limited. There is 1 minute for discussion, after which the decision is written on the form and submitted. The response will be assessed according to the probability level from critical success to critical failure. To make things more interesting, participants must make a contribution and, if they win, receive 5 times the amount of their contribution. The entire entry fee will be transferred to the Academy. Questions are welcome. Caleb asks if he can put the amount of his reward as an entry fee. Edward allows this privilege only to him and Urnal and asks them to move on to forming teams. The man also lets his son's rescuers choose their teammates first, since they are newcomers. Caleb chooses Urnal, causing Edward's admiration. He is impressed by her concern for his comrade. When asked if the elf agrees, she replies that she also wants to be on the same team with Caleb. Edward asks if the guy will regret his decision, since there are plenty of strong candidates around. Caleb says there's a reason he chooses Urnal. She's the only ranger here. Edward laughs, encouraging the boy's ingenuity and saying that he installed a spell that interferes with the use of magic. And this applies to everyone except the Lady Ranger. Meldini jokingly reproaches the owner of the estate. He offers to choose the last participant, and Caleb immediately answers. And he chooses Isel Berthaven, Edward's eldest daughter, as the third member of the team. As he replays the memories in his head, he not only thinks that this girl is a 5th-level mage, but also that that room, according to the younger brother, belongs to her. The girl has shown outstanding talent since childhood, so it's unlikely that she's obsessed, but this is still a great chance. But then Caleb begins to feel that he has attracted too much attention from Isel's fans, and the latter admits that she is not interested in this game itself. However, she is curious to see the power of a genius magician, so she is not against this scenario. The competition participants move to the Britvan Estate Gardens, and Edward, informing them that there is only one exit scroll, wishes all the players good luck. The guy admires the magic of illusions, because this labyrinth is indistinguishable from the real one. The elf says that she can't hear any members of other teams nearby at all. The guy suggests that noise suppression magic was also used here, which upsets Yurnal. But the girl immediately comes to her senses, asking what about them then. Isel asks not to worry about it because she just took care of it. Caleb suggests hurrying. Yurnal indulges in memories, but they are asked to stop. And he shares that each participant has 5 messages, that is, 15 in total, offering a strategy. Caleb believes that other teams will think the same way as Isel, so it's worth hurrying, because they need to pass all the tests as quickly as possible and get the scroll as soon as possible. Isel still doesn't agree, believing that the risk is too high. Caleb mentally curses the slowness of the mages, and he suggests voting, taking advantage of his elf's loyalty. She is at a loss, asking again if the guy wants to know her opinion, but pulls herself together. Yurnal immediately says that he is on Caleb's side, and he mentally rejoices. And Isel gives in, repeating that she doesn't give a damn whether they win or lose. The girl thinks that the rumors about this guy's genius may simply be exaggerated. A little later, running past the site of a brutal battle, Caleb calls out. He announces his intention to use another message, but is interrupted. Isel asks what he's doing, since the test hasn't even begun yet. If you look closely, you can recognize the illusion of corpses pierced by spears and swords. Caleb points out that most of them are naked. If they were kobolds, the bodies would be mutilated, so it can't be them. Caleb knows full well that the monster that has a habit of ripping off clothes is a banshee. This means that he now needs a disguise, and the guy activates shorthand magic. She turns the entire squad into children until the entire team leaves the banshee's territory. This is because Caleb knows that banshees don't harm children. Since this monster's territory is passed silently, the team receives a bottle of banshee's tears. Immediately after this, the squad finds itself in a very hot place, where the air becomes heavier with each passing moment. Caleb suggests it could be a magma forge, a sludge, or an elemental. Isel thinks that the monster might be a fire giant, but the boy retorts, "These marks look like steel eaters chewing on pieces of iron." Caleb asks to send a message to throw the explosives without setting them on fire, but not Yurnil. Isel doesn't argue, obediently activating message transfer magic. And he is surprised that, after successfully completing the task, they receive the knight's 2-handed sword. The girl is amazed at how reckless this guy can be, and he remembers Amber's words about Caleb's possession of exceptional knowledge about the possessed. She admitted that something like this was possible, but she didn't think that this knowledge was so deep. The girl doesn't believe that even one possessed person is capable of something similar. After the cleanup, Caleb suggests the girls slow down and catch their breath, and Isel agrees. Taking advantage of her weakness, the guy asks the girl about her knowledge of the possessed. She becomes even more confused, asking why he suddenly brought up this topic so suddenly. Caleb continues relentlessly, citing Professor Amber as an example. The girl freezes in her tracks, realizing that her interlocutor knows about her relationship with this man, and she begins to fear that Caleb overheard their conversation before the start of this game. But she doesn't understand how, because if she used the noise suppression spell, she would expose him. Brainstorming helps, and the girl manages to extract the necessary detail from her memory, for she remembers the elf's words about how she is useless when she can't hear anything. And Isel begins to guess why this guy took with him not an experienced magician, but a newbie. It also suggests that these two initially suspected the professor and were keeping an eye on him. When Isel thinks that Caleb found out about this not today, she is called out, drawing attention to herself. The guy asks her to calm down, saying that he does not intend to harm the otherworldly beings, but just wants to talk. And first he asks the girl to tell him about the meeting of otherworldly beings that the professor is gathering. The girl stutters, saying that she herself doesn't really know all the details. She understands mentally that she won't be able to evade this, which is why she chooses this option. Isel says the meetings are held at the academy, in a closed club whose members hide their identities. Caleb asks why she goes there if she is a displaced person, and the girl answers. Caleb now understands that they wanted to ensure their safety by relying on the power of the Britvans. He asks the girl why a 5th-level mage still attends meetings, and she hesitates. And he says that, although he cannot say it, he can do everything else except this. Caleb says he doesn't need the money, but the girl can get information about 2 old members of his team. Izel agrees to obtain this information in lieu of an answer to the question asked earlier. And then the guy suggests trying to guess why she is a member of Amber's closed club. The girl tenses up when she hears the words that she wants to get to other floors of the labyrinth. Caleb says it was easy because the club can only offer what is most lacking. He offers to join forces with him, saying that he will tell her something that even Professor Amber does not know. Of course, the guy doesn't insist on this, promising to keep this conversation only between them. While the girl is thinking about these words, the elf turns to Caleb. Coming closer to him, Urnil asks the question that torments her most now. Namely, do they really have a lot of money now? To which Caleb sighs heavily. And he mentally wonders if this elf really doesn't understand what's going on. The torchlight illuminates Azel's face, momentarily revealing her true emotions. The girl thinks about the content of the message, which turned out to be quite humiliating. According to it, Azel must sing hymns and dance for 3 minutes in front of her team, Caleb jokes. The girl asks if she really has to do this. The answer is yes, if there is no fine involved. Realizing there's nothing he can do, Izel takes a deep breath and hesitantly begins to sing, and make awkward movements of some kind of dance, helping yourself with your hand and then your foot. Caleb is amazed at the girl's lack of talent, wondering if he's at the kindergarten matinee. Izel stops dancing, squealing in protest and asking not to be laughed at. Caleb tries to cheer her up, but the girl asks him to keep what he saw and heard a secret. Then the guy invites his companions to continue their journey. Once they're there, Caleb makes an announcement, alerting the girls. The elf, saying that she sees an altar, asks if the summoning of the scroll takes place there. Instead of a precise answer, Izel advises summoning the scroll in 5 minutes. Voices are heard nearby, and from the conversation it becomes clear that all they have left to do is send a message. Complimenting the opposing team, the trio says that they were simply following them all this time. Meldini says Professor Amber offered to help, as things are not easy for a team of newbies. But Caleb doesn't believe it, realizing that this cunning bastard was simply watching them this whole time. The guy suggests out loud that Amber wanted to evaluate his knowledge of the otherworldly. The professor challenges Caleb to a battle, asking him to view the game as part of his education. The guy notes that regardless of the outcome, the winnings will belong to the opposing team. But he suggests doing things differently, offering the winner of the duel the chance to take the jackpot. Professor Meldini says it will be a fight against the use of messages. Caleb accepts the challenge and, turning to the elf, asks her to run to the altar. Instantly jumping up, Urnil agrees, asking Caleb to rely on her. But her opponent says that won't do, and uses stenography, fire blast. Caleb also uses stenography in response, but only silent spell on Professor Haley. The latter cannot use spells for half a minute, and Meldini activates heavy charge. Also, when casting a spell within stenography, Azel uses Guardian's Shield. For some time there is a desperate struggle in an attempt to break through the barrier, but eventually, Azel's shield is destroyed, stunning the girl and leaving her unable to move for 10 seconds. She slumps down, repeating these words, and Caleb is asked why he is doing nothing at such a moment. Meldini becomes curious about what the guy is going to do at such a moment. He only smirks before activating his hourglass, starting his turn. The guy thinks that Haley is a mage by class, and Meldini is a barbarian. Since Ember hasn't attacked yet, Caleb suggests that he might be a support. The one who observes, while fulfilling the role assigned to him, can only be a priest. Caleb gives Urnil an order, according to which she, having noticed the scroll on the altar, must activate it. When the turn ends, Meldini feels the power of the silent mage, receiving a message about his own death. Convinced of the truth of the rumors, the professor turns to Amber, asking him to quickly resurrect himself. He starts to cast Phoenix Rise, but Caleb throws Banshee Tears at him. A piercing scream that seemed to come out of nowhere ruins all his plans. Meldini is also perplexed by what it is, although he desperately tries to figure it out. According to the message, a man struck by the Banshee's scream will be inflicted with a stunned status for 20 seconds. Noticing movement on the altar, Urnil turns to Caleb, informing him of the scroll's materialization. The elf rushes to the artifact, intending to convey the message, but does not make it in time. She is interrupted by Professor Haley, who performs a shorthand summon on the target. Slipping right from under Urnil's nose, the scroll rushes towards its summoner with lightning speed. And she receives a message about the successfully completed summoning, and the item itself is in her hand. Saying she is sorry, the woman praises the students who fought well and suggests ending the game. But just as she is about to deliver the message, she learns that she has been deceived by illusionary magic. The elf is surprised, inertly clarifying that this was not a real exit scroll. Caleb confirms this by saying that the real scroll hasn't even appeared yet, and turns to Urnil. She, touching the real exit scroll, carries out the message transmission. Later, Professor Meldini congratulates the winners on completing the game. Caleb thanks him, and the old man says goodbye to the student. saying that it was fun. He says that he will look forward to their next meeting within the walls of the academy. A voice behind the guy says that what he did was cool. Addison admits that he has never seen anything like it before and suggests that they play together later. It turns out that this game was created by Edward specifically for his son, namely, for his training. Now one thing becomes clear to Caleb, but he doesn't understand this attitude. Clarence agrees that it's unusual, but there's a reason the family treasures Avison. Even the Brit fans were not spared the consequences of the labyrinth's breach 12 years ago. At that time, many people passed away, and there was great mourning, and it seemed that there was no escape from this darkness. But at that moment, they had a ray of hope in the form of 6-year-old Avison. Thanks to this boy, they were able to quickly recover, despite the fact that their pain did not go away. And even so, at that moment, this child managed to literally save the entire family. A voice is heard from behind, noting that the guy has said almost everything he wanted. Edward agrees with his eldest son, and says that this is not the right place for the award ceremony. Inviting the company to follow him, the owner of the estate leads the young people into its depths. Edward says he would give them anything without regret, but he believes that doing so could corrupt the newcomers. Therefore, the man is going to give them something that will be useful and appropriate for both of them right now. Urinal becomes even more interesting when the other person expresses hope that they will like it. Caleb expected something similar from this family, since they all studied well at the academy. He holds the ring of instant copying in his hands, carefully studying this magical item. This magic allows you to instantly transfer the original text and reproduce it anywhere. The guy is going to use the empty scroll that he found last time in the labyrinth. Urinal turns to her interlocutor, clarifying whether it is true that this can now be considered her thing. The elf is delighted with this new wrist guard for archery. While Caleb says that all this will be very useful to them, the man offers another 200,000 gold. This is 5 times the number of items they bet on during the game. The elf is afraid to imagine how much wrist protection would cost in that case. Caleb mentally agrees that such a sum would make the average person shudder. Edward, meanwhile, says that there is nothing more precious and saint than his own handshake. And if any difficulties arise, he allows you to contact him without hesitation. Shaking his interlocutor's hand, Caleb thanks him sincerely. They leave the office and continue on their way in complete silence. But Caleb's instincts pick up a signal on his radar, and the boy looks up. Turning to the guy, Azel asks if they will spare some time for her. And in his own chambers, a little later, he uses a noise suppression spell. The girl says that what she is about to tell them is still unknown to anyone. As she approaches Caleb, Azel remembers his question about why she was with the otherworldly club. This is in order to get information from them by moving further into the labyrinth. Azel says that she needs this in order to end all the monsters. At 15, she was not just a gifted student, but the top student at the Magic Academy. And behind the student stood her grandfather, who spared nothing to support his beloved granddaughter. Alongside him is the Otherworldly Club, which taught the girl how to combine magic. Thanks to her innate talent and influential family, Azel was able to obtain unique information. The girl was sure that she would become the best magician and saint until hell broke loose. On that day, 12 years ago, when the family estate was burning, her name was desperately called. And when they found her, they asked her to take the younger ones and run to the teleporter. The girl did not understand what was happening. Edward said there was no time for explanations, asking his daughter to act as quickly as possible. And at that moment, her inquisitive light eyes caught how her grandfather's figure rolled across the ground. Azel screamed at the man, but he didn't answer, knowing what it would cost. And from the hot smoke, a dark figure appeared, slowly but surely approaching the grandfather. He turned to his family at the very last moment, only to keep them safe. Having shouted out the words that the labyrinth had broken through, the man stopped short. After all, the sound of his voice was interrupted by the clear swing of the enemy's blade, which foreshadowed death. Edward was taken aback for just a moment, but just as quickly pulled himself together. Pushing his daughter into the portal, he told her to take care of her younger brothers. The girl didn't even have a voice when she heard the instruction that they absolutely had to survive. She was only able to put words together into speech when her father was almost out of sight. Azel believes that the blame for all of this lies entirely with her, due to her connection with the otherworldly. That's what she thought, but now she blames monsters for everything, and people still haven't understood that. Azel screams when he talks about not just wanting to kill the monsters, but to destroy the labyrinth altogether. She recalls that even her father appreciates the benefits of the labyrinth, believing that feelings should not interfere with control. Even the Ember Club gave up, claiming they couldn't get rid of the monsters. Azel is sad that there is not a single person who could support her dream. Caleb wonders if the club is still providing information to this girl. And when Azel says that she wants revenge, the guy understands that these people are manipulating her feelings of guilt. But he doesn't understand why she doesn't make long-term plans. Because it's profitable, why take risks? He hints at this to Azel, and she suggests that she might simply be used for their own purposes. She says that after killing the master of the labyrinth, the otherworldly will be able to return home. For Caleb, these words come as news, crashing down like a powerful stream. Similar words were engraved on the tombstone doll stream found on the 3rd floor. It said that when the master of the labyrinth dies, the war with the otherworldly beings will end and they will return home. Now Caleb understands the reason why they want to send this girl even deeper. Meanwhile, Azel says that Ember's club will try to involve him as well. The guy thinks that he now knows the reason why they want to get him before Black Dog. Azel says that by telling about this, she is risking a lot. Caleb thanks the girl for her courage. She asked the same question, clarifying that they are now on the same team. Caleb chuckles before answering, pausing dramatically, and then he confirms the girl's words, agreeing that they are now in the same boat. They shake hands after Azel expresses hope for a fruitful collaboration. It's not visible from here, but what's now sparkling in the sky is far from a star. Landing nimbly on a branch, the elf crouches, concentrating and bracing herself. Noticing a target ahead of her, she suddenly takes off, rushing towards it, and then he asks Caleb how he is, and he praises Urnil, saying that everything is wonderful. The guy thinks that the ability to teleport short distances is suitable for an elf. She also asks what Caleb is going to do now. He says that he is still thinking about it. It's all because of Azel's words, and the guy was truly sincere in agreeing to cooperate with her. He thinks that no matter how great a magician he becomes here, he does not belong here. The most concerning thing, and the question of whether the otherworldly ones follow it, is the 2-week rule. Caleb suggests that there might be a way or a loophole to get around this rule. Urnil asks if Caleb wants to defeat the master of the labyrinth, but there is not enough information yet. First of all, the guy wants to personally examine the stone that their new ally spoke about. There's no need to rush yet. The most important thing is to sort everything out and make a plan. For example, the answer to a secret that will be discovered in the labyrinth by chance may be encrypted on that stone. Caleb wants to check everything out himself before Ember's club contacts him personally. Urnil admits that she couldn't fully understand everything that Azel was talking about, but she is absolutely sure that her comrade will be able to defeat the master of the labyrinth. The guy thanks his interlocutor for the praise, and she calls meeting him in the labyrinth the greatest success. The elf says that until recently she only worked and barely made ends meet, and she could not even dream that she would ever be able to attend a reception with the nobility. Hearing the words about the cost of the dress, Caleb thinks that the reason for the purchase was to not stand out. Meanwhile, Urnil says that together they can reach the farthest floors, and the elf begs her companion to take her with him. And then she quietly admits that she tries very hard not to be a burden to him. Caleb looks at this kind and naive girl for a while, doing nothing, and then a smile appears on his lips at the thought of how he needs to get to the master of the labyrinth as quickly as possible. Sometime later, his name is shouted out in the dorm, calling out to him. Asking what happened, he hurries to meet Urnil, but freezes in indecision. The elf asks him to help her with her dress because the zipper on her clothes is stuck. She asks him if the guy can just lower her down. Caleb agrees to watch, and Urnil quickly asks if it really isn't working. He concludes that more effort is needed, and the girl is afraid that the lock might break. As soon as Caleb does this, the clasp suddenly drops down with its characteristic sound. The elf screams in embarrassment and, continuing to scream, tries to hold onto her dress. The guy screams along with her, just as embarrassed as she is, and tries to fix the situation. Apologizing, he helps her cover up the embarrassing thoughts in her head. From the outside, it probably looks completely different from what it actually is, and Caleb mentally sighs with relief that no one can see them now. But these conclusions are made hastily, because the door opens and a drawn-out and puzzled interjection is heard. Bak-ek asks the couple what they are doing here in the pitch darkness. Urnil asks what he's doing here, and Caleb tells her that he called this guy. The elf throws them both out, asking how much longer they intend to stand there. Rizik sheepishly asks if he really just ruined everything for them, and Caleb grieves over the lost room. Saying that it's just a misunderstanding, the brunette asks his interlocutor not to think about anything strange. He advises the boy to take a rest and begins to talk about how he has neither money nor a home. Beck chuckles, saying that he now understands why Ames decided to be with this guy at the party. And he, saying that from now on he will call Caleb bro, asks to also accept him into his team. He says that he would be glad to do this, and promises to contact Ames with an offer to go to the labyrinth together. Beck isn't sure if Ames will succeed, and his interlocutor asks why. Rizik replies that the monk's wife was very shocked when she found out that the guy had come back to life. And now she says that she will never let them go into the labyrinth again, and Caleb wants to talk to the woman about it. With similar thoughts, the next day, the guy goes to Ames's house. And the latter's wife, apologizing, refuses, saying that the children need their father. She is not going to let her husband go to the labyrinth even for thousands of gold. And for a while, there is silence in the room, during which Caleb thinks hard. He's considering a minimum guaranteed income that includes the contract fee for the first floor. Ames reminds his wife that the children will need money for education, but she doesn't care. And amidst the shocked cries, Caleb offers the family 10,000 gold. Ames asks to hold his horses, because such money can only be earned in a few trips to the first floor. The woman begins to shake with rage, assuming that Caleb is trying to bribe her. Having calmed down a little, she comes to the conclusion that this payment is not for the first floor at all. Under the woman's sullen gaze, Caleb agrees with these words, confirming them. Beck asks her not to worry so much, because the second floor is not that difficult either. With the genius newbie and the magician by his side, he and Ames could easily overcome the second floor. But, hearing the words about the third floor, the boy becomes puzzled. He himself finds it difficult to believe it. Words fly over the city about how difficult it was for him to obtain his wife's permission. But Ames himself is now worried, because they need the appropriate equipment for the third floor. He believes that for their own safety, it would be good to have a magic rank artifact. But these are only sold at auctions, and that won't be held anytime soon. Beck believes that if you can't buy something, you can always borrow it, and he knows a lot of good places for that. Caleb finds the rent expensive, and it's not profitable for them. Yrnil asks what they should do then. The guy has an idea, and asks his friends to wait for him a little. Thinking about what he could do, he goes straight to the Temple of Nathaniel. The bishop says he heard from Bernard that the other man had actually taken over his mission. He was going to reward the young man adequately, and now he asks if he really wants magical equipment. In an apology to Caleb, Egil says that this request cannot be granted, and his interlocutor clarifies whether this is not what was originally intended for the paladin Bernard. And, as far as the guy remembers, he was supposed to be given a share of the lizard. The bishop hesitantly confirms these words. And Caleb asks what Nathaniel, the goddess of private contracts and deals, would say about that. Egil laughs nervously, admitting that his interlocutor has caught him out, and asks to speak. Realizing that it is not in the bishop's interest for bad rumors to spread about the temple, Caleb expresses his will. Returning to his comrades, the leader asks them how long they waited, showing goodness. Among the new items is equipment suitable for each of the group members. Beck asks Caleb if he really made that much money in the labyrinth alone. And he, smiling mysteriously, answers, saying that this is not all. These items were received as rewards not only from the church, but also from the academy and others. This dagger was obtained from the treasury, and it also has magical properties. Ames becomes curious about what rewards can be obtained on the third floor. Caleb says that he didn't give the monk's family 10,000 gold pieces for nothing, and he asks to send his child to a decent school, and this completes the team's preparation. Caleb suggests that in a few days, when the labyrinth opens, they climb to the third floor. And so they do, wandering through the corridors of the dungeon after the designated time has passed. In this place, eerie sounds can be clearly heard, and a musty smell hangs like a thick wall. Even though Caleb had been here several times, the uneasy feeling from entering still lingered. He wonders if he will ever be able to get used to this. Turning to Yrnil, the guy asks the girl why she didn't wear a wrist guard. She says that it is there, but hidden under gloves, because this thing is expensive. When Caleb answered whether this was really necessary, the elf responded with an unconditional affirmation. She is afraid that someone might try to steal her wrist guard. Beck informs his companions that this gate leads to the second floor of the labyrinth. Ames reminds that people should enter one at a time, with 3-second intervals. Yrnil suddenly becomes thoughtful and almost immediately turns to his leader. A memory from the relatively recent past comes to mind against my will, and the girl expresses fears that when they go inside, bandits will be waiting for them. Caleb agrees that it is possible, and that means the first one in is the most vulnerable. Then Yrnil begins to worry about the question of which of the team will go to the gate first. Caleb responds by saying that safety is their priority right now, and he asks Ames to go first, but only with the steel umbrella prepared in advance. Caleb is about to go second, and the monk asks him the reason for this. Beck agrees with his friend that the magician should be last, and he second. But Caleb objects, and the monk agrees with the more knowledgeable one, notifying his friends that he is entering. The guy thinks that, if anything happens, Ames won't be able to fall in some measly 3 seconds. And perhaps no one will fall, because it is difficult to deal with a prepared person. The smartest thing to do is to target the second one and kill him, but in general, no one knows what might happen. As he says he's coming in, Caleb remembers that he has the hourglass. Finding himself on the other side, the guy tenses up, calling out to Ames in a low voice. And he asks how it happened, but the man says that he had nothing to do with it. Caleb agrees that it would be strange to deal with 4 of them at once in 3 seconds. The monk suggests that these are the bodies of those killed by robbers, but his interlocutor denies this possibility. After all, robbers would not act in such a careful manner. Caleb mentally notes that 2 of the 4 died from stab wounds, so nothing out of the ordinary. However, if you look at another couple, the situation changes radically. It appears they were affected by a second-tier necromancy spell, corrosive tumor. His fellow sufferer has unfocused eyes, which is unlikely to be a physiological feature. And the guy assumes that this unfortunate man was finished off by the necromancy self-destruction of cells. This suggests that there is someone on the second floor of the labyrinth who has mastered 3rd-tier spells. Yrnil, saying that Beck also passed, asks what to do next. The guy tells him to go. The elf is amazed that there is a swamp on the second floor of the labyrinth. And the guy, taking the next step, meets the eyes of something that makes him tense up. The sight of such a terrible picture makes one think of gloomy thoughts. That everything is much more serious than Caleb expected from this place. The Water Ones, who are monsters of the second floor, just like the previous group, died from wounds or from necromancy. The monk finds this sight horrific, asking what could have happened here. Grabbing Caleb, Yurnal says she is very scared. He mentally agrees with the elf, because even he finds it difficult to watch such a brutal massacre. And corpses similarly cover the entire path up to the third floor. Caleb starts to get a bad feeling about this, wanting to catch this crazy necromancer. Saying that they are going to the third floor, the guy tells everyone to take their positions. Handing Ames a helmet, he says that this piece of equipment might be useful there. Thanks to the leader, the man asks him to wait, saying that he will go first again. Saying that they are counting on him, Caleb asks the monk to be careful. The guy mentally adds that a necromancer could be standing right at the exit of the portal. Following Ames, already at the exit, Caleb sees an interesting picture. His eyes freeze in shock as he faces 3 opponents at once. But realizing who is in front of him, Caleb asks in disappointment if it is really them. His acquaintances, unlike him, are happy to meet again, amazed by this guy's progress. The elf who arrived was also happy to see her acquaintances, greeting them in a friendly manner. Saikal, turning to Yurnal, says that she is unrecognizable with such equipment. But they are not alone, and the fourth, turning to Virtanen, asks about his acquaintance with these adventurers. The dwarf happily announces that he will now introduce them to each other, starting with the mage of their team. He seizes the initiative, introducing himself as Antonelli and saying that he has heard a lot about Caleb, and also expresses hope that they will be able to work well together. The guy asks Emma why they are with a necromancer, since they are priests. The priestess replies that Caleb has misunderstood everything, and this man does not use undead magic. Antonelli confirms these words, saying that he does not possess this kind of magic at all. Hearing the words that there are no problems with the priests, Caleb perceives this as a threat, and he speaks out loud about the spells that the necromancer used on the first 2 floors, which, when combined, create another thing called raising the dead. And the guy asks why a 4th-level mage joined Virtanen's team. Interrupting their conversation, the dwarf asks Caleb to stop and cool down a bit. And then he asks how the guy knew that Antonelli is a 4th-level magician, and he makes an argument in favor of the magician, but Caleb successfully parries it, adding his own counter-argument. He thinks that there is no point in Antonelli joining them. It is generally extremely suspicious. A scolded Virtanen says that they wanted to get to the 3rd floor with this man. And Caleb mentally considers such haste a mistake because one must be careful with sweet talk. The guy approaches Antonelli, asking why he joined the 2nd floor team. And he assumes that he needed this in order to get to the 3.5 floor. Virtanen asks, dumbfounded, what this all means. He has never heard of such a thing. And Caleb continues, believing that the necromancer led the others to this place by deception. He learned of this from Lendiford, who said that his friend had been dragged to the 3rd floor. His soul, located on the 3.5 floor, is of particular interest to the necromancer, and Caleb asks if Antonelli wants to try to extract this soul. But if you do this, a wave of mobs will break out and all the adventurers will die, so there must be permission from the guild. Caleb orders the man standing opposite him to answer his question immediately, and Yurnal, not doubting the leader's truthfulness at all, moves to action. She is sure that if Caleb says so, then this man is truly dangerous. And as soon as the brunette attacks, the elf is also going to immediately release the arrow from the bowstring. Virtanen, sensing something was wrong, stutters with excitement and asks Caleb to calm down. After this, he makes an identical request to the elf. She is indeed a little puzzled, not understanding who she should listen to. And Virtanen continues, offering Antonelli a chance to say something in his defense. After all, Caleb himself knows that necromancy is not always a sign of something bad. The guy asks if the dwarf is absolutely sure that Antonelli has no suspicious motives. And then the silent man speaks up, saying that he now understands all these latest rumors. He admits that the guy's conclusions are reasonable, and honestly admits that they are all going to the 3.5 floor. Since it was their first time on the 3rd floor, the magician thought that they would easily follow his instructions. He apologizes for hiding it all, and says he didn't mean to hurt them. Antonelli expresses confidence that none of them will be harmed, but he needs help. Saikal asks if he really thinks they are all idiots now, and if they will really come with him. Caleb corrects the Beastman, saying that they could go with Antonelli. Since this is the group's first time on the 3rd floor, they may not know one thing. Namely, that adventurers often fall under the confusion spell. The priests have protection, but if something goes wrong, you can only come to your senses on the 3.5 floor. Ames now understands why the leader will ask him to wear this torch helmet. Virtanen asks how this scoundrel could deceive them while planning something dangerous. He says that this is a misunderstanding, and everything is not at all as they all thought. He talks about another reason, and Caleb, asking about it, learns about another adventurer. The latter is a friend of Antonelli, and both were members of Lendiford's crew. Several years ago, 3 adventurers arrived here from the east. Besides the swordsman, they included the spirit tribe Taoist Tiger Lily. And the last one was a warrior from the Goblin tribe, whose name was Kitlali. They explored the third floor together for some time, but Antonelli later left the team. After this happened, the team lost one of their comrades, Kitlali. The two-person team broke up because they started blaming each other. Hearing the words about the gut labyrinth theory, the dwarf thinks about its meaning. Caleb recalls something very similar being featured in the teaser for the game. It turns out that as they move further and further, the commands gradually begin to be digested like fats in the intestines. And so they reach the master of the labyrinth himself, who will absorb the most nutritious adventurer. Antonelli notes among all this multitude the theory of the beginning of digestion of the group. After all, when he left, he lost his comrade, and so the entire group was digested. But its leader did not give up despite this, continuing to challenge the labyrinth again and again. Addressing Caleb, the magician says that Lendiford's life is in danger, and he is doing everything for him. Vertanen says he accepts this reason, despite the deception. Caleb asks if he can ask Landiford to confirm these words, and the answer is yes. He is even offered to send a message, and the guy takes advantage of this opportunity. Vertanen says they can't just stand and wait. He suggests meeting Lendiford in person. Emma agrees, saying that she doesn't think Antonelli's words are lies. And then the man says that his former leader cannot use message magic. Then Caleb begins to doubt his unshakable confidence in his mind. And just as he starts to apologize, a reply to the message sent arrives. Lendiford doesn't know who Antonelli is, saying there was no such person on their team. As unpleasant shivers begin to creep up my spine, Antonelli speaks up. The man says he could have just left things as they were, instead of going through the motions. And as if by chance he remarks that it seems they have already assimilated. Saying they have problems, the man is going to use the skeleton armor. But Caleb manages to stop time with the hourglass, exhaling dejectedly. He becomes convinced that he is right about necromancers using souls to customize magic. The guy concludes that the news of Beck's resurrection reminded Antonelli of the 3.5 floor. And the necromancer's most coveted trophy is the strongest soul, namely the boss of the 3rd floor. This man resorted to the most brutal methods to obtain souls without hesitation, and he doesn't care at all that Vertanen's team could be completely destroyed. If a wave of monsters had attacked, Antonelli would have simply fled to the 4th floor, and that would have been it. And now the guy is thinking about what to do with this rotten person. To avoid any problems later, it would be good to finish off the necromancer in one turn. But if you can't kill him, the best option would be to immobilize him with the superconductor. And even though they have a difference in levels, Antonelli will definitely get an electric shock from 4 discharges. On top of that, the guy asks Yurnal to shoot the hand in which the necromancer holds the magic wand. And, having thus exhausted all his action points, Caleb ends his turn. And Antonelli, screaming in pain, unclenches his fingers, releasing his magic wand. When it falls to the floor with a corresponding sound, the man rushes after it, screaming. And just as he manages to grab it, an arrow already fired from the bow pierces his hand. Having carried out Caleb's orders, the elf prepares for the next one. And the man throws his weapon into his other hand, not wanting to let go again. However, disappointment awaits him again, and Antonelli, surprised, tries to understand what is wrong. The thing is that Bakak cut the man's wrist in his swift dash. And before he even has time to come to his senses, a new enemy is already approaching, getting ready to attack. The monk manages not only to knock the necromancer down, but also successfully immobilize him. Everyone surrounds their enemy, no longer believing him completely, but he does not give up. Asking them to stop, the man is going to try to justify himself again. But Caleb, grabbing Antonelli by the hem of his cloak, reveals what he was hiding. This scroll of ladder is usually used for escape, helping to teleport to the ladder, respectively. From this, it becomes obvious that the necromancer had been preparing in advance for the monster's breakthrough. And while Yurnal and Caleb are discussing this, Antonelli asks for salvation. He confirms that he tried to illegally obtain souls, but sees nothing irreparable here. Strengthening his own faith, the man notices that he has not yet harmed anyone. He asks Emma to save him, reminding her that they are on the same team. The priestess begins to recite the terms of the contract he signed in a frighteningly calm tone, and it reminds that any actions that could lead to a disaster in the labyrinth are prohibited, and in case of failure, the person who committed the crime may be executed by other adventurers. Exhaling heavily, Vertanen silently approaches his former ally, and, swinging his arm, he tells Antonelli that he is truly sorry. Looking at the blood staining the blade of his weapon, the dwarf thinks about something he could never have imagined. Initially, he really doubted Antonelli's proposal because he was at a higher level than them, but I made a bet on trusting his reputation, achievements, and merits. And although Vertanen could not help but believe the necromancer's deception, he now feels a sense of shame. Caleb says he understands why they wanted to protect this man, and he asks them to return to the 2nd floor, because first, they need the appropriate equipment. For now, this place is too dangerous for their team. The dwarf agrees, promising to repay the boy for saving him when they meet in the city another time. Thanking him, they leave, and Vertanen thinks about how this kid has surpassed them in just a month. Calling Caleb a talented adventurer, Ames admires him. Bakek echoes his bro's words, saying that it was really cool. Hearing the elf's giggles, Caleb asks her what's wrong with her. She admits that she was ready for battle as soon as their leader suspected this necromancer. Caleb asks her incredulously to clarify this question, to which he receives a positive answer. The elf continues, saying that she has 100% confidence in her leader, and she starts bragging about how she immediately pulled the bowstring and shot the necromancer right in the hand. Thinking about what he told her, the guy suddenly notices something curious. Looking at this item, he remembers that it was quite useful during the game, and in general, this necromancer's inventory can be called a walking treasure trove because he is a level 4 necromancer. After the guy finishes robbing the corpse, he begins to take stock, and he invites his team to follow their path, continuing to move forward. The sight of these snow-capped mountain peaks makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. Yurnal, her teeth chattering from the cold, regrets that she didn't put on something warmer. Caleb, turning to her, asks the elf to walk next to the monk. And there is a reason for this, because the torch helmet worn by a man emits warmth. In addition, it will not allow anyone to fall under the influence of the mental magic of this floor within 10 meters. The elf freezes and, turning to Caleb, says that she hears something very strange. The guy makes a guess that there is an ice hunter somewhere nearby, and the leader asks his group to be ready for a surprise attack at any moment. Noticing a group passing by, he begins to quickly scurry about, preparing to attack. And then he shoots the ice pick from his magic wand at the most opportune moment. The monk, who noticed this movement in time, erected a steel umbrella over his comrades. The ground beneath our feet begins to pulsate, and silhouettes of approaching snow-white animals appear ahead. Bakek turns to the elf, asking Yurnal to shoot upwards immediately. Reacting with lightning speed, the blonde follows the boy's advice, firing a triple shot. Each of the 3 fired shells hits the target precisely, before it had time to retreat. And from below, the red-haired one throws a flying sword at the wolf, striking him to death, and a monk helps him. One of the wolves gets dangerously close to the ladder and jumps. But he, not intending to give up so easily, resorts to the help of the destruction of Gaia. With one powerful and wide blow, Ames manages to get rid of several monsters at once. And Caleb thinks that even though it's an ice hunter, they already have a tactic ready. He himself is not going to sit on the sidelines, helping his comrades with the dust explosion. And at some point he hears Beck's puzzled voice addressing him. By saying it's so huge, the boy prompts Yurnal to question the item's classification. Caleb mentally agrees that it would be difficult to find anything similar on the first 2 floors. The boy enthusiastically rushes towards the ice hunter, wanting to get his stone too. But in the process he freezes and stops, and then cries out in admiration. The thing is that Beck sees not only an item of this size for the first time, but also a C-rank item. Caleb mentally notes the excitement of the elf and the redhead, as well as Ames's calm. But he is already looking forward to having the first payment for his son's education in his hands. Letting out a heavy sigh, Caleb mentally noted that the big guy was there too, and the inspired elf suggests catching another ice hunter. The trio runs away to the joyful cries of Beck about how they will be rich and the bewilderment of the leader. He, more for himself, asks his children to be more careful. Sharp blades cut through the air, warning their prey for the first and only time. The second one turns out to be much more serious, knocking a roar of pain out of the ice hunter. The creature says that it uses frost protection magic, but not without caveats. Fog of the Kappa tribe cries because his feet are literally freezing from the cold. They ask him to put on shoes, calling him an idiot, but he objects because Kappas don't wear shoes. The fox notices that he already had frostbite. Her name is Sophia, and she is from the fox tribe. Fog states the fact that he is a Kappa with a puzzled expression, trying to sound more confident. 3 days have passed, and their team still can't find the stairs between the floors. They start talking about changes, but Fog stops them, crying out in bewilderment. He can't believe his eyes when he rhetorically asks if this is really the 3rd floor. After carefully examining the corpse's robe, Sophia notices that it belongs to a 4th-level mage. Noticing a familiar piece of paper, the man approaches it, picks it up, and reads it. It actually does contain a message that he himself sent to Caleb recently. He shares this with the team, and the fox realizes that this mage was killed by this Caleb's group. Fog notes that this is not the time to look at the papers and corpses, and calls his comrades to come to him. Following the request, they try to understand what happened in this place while looking at the picturesque spectacle. Of course, it is the battlefield left behind by Caleb's team. Fog states the fact that someone also killed all the ice hunters. Sophia asks her companion about Caleb's team being on the 3rd floor for the first time. Lendiford confirms this, admitting that he himself does not understand what is happening, but wants to find out. Meanwhile, Caleb, seeing what they were looking for, reports it to his comrades. In front of them there really is a stele called the Stele of the Eradication of Evil, and the leader of the group gives the order that they will set up their camp in this place. The first thing Caleb does is take out a blank scroll and use that same copy magic. Looking over the guy's shoulder at the text that appeared on the paper, the elf finds it strange. Beck notices 3 strange boxes, which Caleb thinks are part of the stele. Ames asks if the guy didn't say the inscription was deciphered, and he confirms the existence of the interpretation. However, Professor Dahlstream was never able to decipher the code. The Silver Dagger Alliance are the allies of the Master of the Labyrinth and the monsters from its depths, and the most important part is overcoming the sorrow of the abyss, namely the same Master of the Labyrinth. Caleb ponders the abandoned otherworldly bodies and their return to their world. He admits that he has seen many arrows in the game, but this is the first time the guy has seen one like this. Caleb believes that if you put something in the boxes, it will be possible to obtain some information. And you need a lot of it, especially before turning to Ember and the Black Dog. Looking at the piece of paper, Caleb continues to think about how to decipher this text. Jumping up from his seat, Urnil addresses the boy, saying that someone is coming. They rise up in full force as a team, and a voice is indeed heard nearby. Sophia greets Caleb, saying that they have heard a lot about him, and Fogg echoes her ally. The guy asks how they knew that they defeated that 4th-level mage. Lendiford says he personally saw a handwritten note next to his body in the morning. The latter does not decompose even after days have passed, because it is cold on the 3rd floor. The guy is confused by the words about the absence of ice hunters. He is amazed that no one went there for 3 days during the revival. Lendiford vehemently declares that they all saw that the body of that magician was intact. No one would have defended the body, but the fact that no one touched it is truly alarming. And then Caleb asks if they noticed anything strange near the magician's head. Hearing the words that she could have grown together with the body, the man recalls the details. And Landoward asks, puzzled, if this man's head had really been cut off.